Roman Dmitri is the youngest son of the Lord of the Dmitri territory. His father, the Lord of Dmitri, rose from being a legendary blacksmith in the Kingdom of Cairo. Every piece of equipment he forged was a masterpiece. When war broke out, Roman's father became the main weapon supplier for the nation, contributing significantly to their victory. After the war ended, he was granted the title of Baron for his contributions, and he eventually became the lord of this land. Lord Dmitri has several sons, and Roman is the biggest failure of them all, not smart, reckless, and even secretly mocked by the servants as the idiot of the Dmitri family. Roman had lived 25 miserable years before Baek Jun-hyuk possessed his body. After waking up in a new body, the first thing Baek Jun-hyuk, no, let's call him Roman now, did was order his servant to take him to the home of the oldest person in the territory. There he listened to the old man recount his father's heroic life, even though the servant didn't understand why the young master suddenly made such a request. It was an absurd one, but regardless, he was a servant, and a loyal servant must complete the tasks assigned by his master. After listening for a while, Roman had a rough understanding of his current identity. He didn't know why he had been reincarnated. Perhaps it was the wish of the heavens, or maybe it was a punishment from the gods, because he didn't agree to ascend. But regardless, since he had been given another life, he had to live it properly. Just as he thought of this, Roman suddenly heard a loud shout from the market just a few steps away. "You son of a bitch!" A skinny young man with red hair was being beaten by a bald, hulking brute until he was barely recognizable as human. While beating him, the guy kept cursing and trampling him. The passersby were terrified and absolutely saw. No one dared to step in to intervene. When Roman's servant saw the commotion, he ran over to check, but upon seeing the bloody fang tattoo on the bald man's shoulder, he looked apprehensive. "What is going on here?" Roman followed him to see what the fuss was about. "Young master, stay here. There are troublemakers. It looks like they're from the blood-cold gang, sir." With the few memories from the original host, Roman had absolutely no impression of that name. According to his servant, they were a loan shark organization. The blood-cold gang's sphere of operations was not just confined to the Dmitri territory, but also in the surrounding regions. It seemed the red-haired youth owed them a large sum of money, which is why he was being beaten to a pulp. "Let's just pretend we didn't see anything, sir. Nothing good will come of us getting involved," Roman's servant whispered. But when he turned around, his young master was nowhere to be seen. True to the cliché, Roman had stepped up to confront the thugs, shouting for them to stop, much to the servant's panic. The blood-cold gang members, upon seeing his appearance, immediately recognized him as the youngest son of the Lord, but they weren't afraid at all. In fact, they laughed out loud. "Well, well, being a noble, you dare to stick your nose into this, and you're even spouting nonsense. Go away, you noble Dmitri, get lost, because this is our private business." Clearly, even though Roman was the Lord's son, these bastards didn't respect him in the slightest. The servant hurriedly urged Roman to head back, because the blood-cold gang was a vicious bunch. However, with the blood of a martial arts master boiling in his veins, how could Roman just ignore an injustice? Hans suddenly spoke up. "I don't understand much about the laws of this place yet. So you explain it to me, who is breaking the law here, and what is the punishment they deserve?" Hans is the name of that servant. Before his young master's question, he seemed quite bewildered. Even though Roman hadn't been very bright before today after one night's sleep, it was as if he had lost his memory completely. Still, if Roman had asked, Hans still had to explain. Because the red-haired youth owed money and couldn't pay it back on time, naturally he was in the wrong. However, the people of the blood-cold gang also were not allowed to handle the matter with such violence, and, most importantly, they had acted disrespectfully toward the youngest son of the Dmitri family. This crime was punishable by death under the laws of this land. "Those people deserve to be executed," Hans said while swallowing hard from fear, especially when facing the death glares from those blood-cold thugs. But after hearing him explain, Roman seemed even more eager for a fight. He casually picked up a dry branch from the side of the road and declared, "Did you hear that? You have violated the laws of this land, and I, the youngest son of Lord Romero Dmitri, will punish you right now." Even Hans was surprised. Today his young master was suddenly so imposing, as if he'd taken the wrong medicine. But the bald guy and his subordinates still weren't worried at all. "Hey, I know you're a noble who doesn't know how the world works, but if you keep this up, you're forcing us to take action." As he said that, they began to pull out their weapons, appearing ready to beat young Master Roman to a pulp. Naturally, with the blood of a martial arts master in his veins, Roman's combat instinct was no match for them at all. He even aggressively charged in to attack first. The Blood Guild members, seeing the young master act so rashly, were a bit thrown off. They drew their daggers and started attacking wildly. But unfortunately, Roman is different from the useless Roman of the past. The dry tree branch in his hand suddenly became as sharp as a sword, piercing the throat of the bald leader. Everyone was stunned by this shocking scene. The remaining Blood Guild members were like they had just had their tails stepped on, completely panicked. They rushed in all at once, trying to gang up on Roman to avenge their comrade. But compared to that bald guy, these losers were even weaker. They couldn't even touch a single hair on Roman's head. Not a chance. On the other side, Roman launched a fierce counterattack. This left Hans with his jaw dropped in shock. Good heavens, is this really the useless young master I've been serving all this time? Even in the middle of an intense fight, Roman looked completely at ease. He even had time to let his mind wander. Thinking back, the first thing he saw after waking up was Roman's will and countless pills scattered on the floor. The territory of the Kizo Kingdom is a place always mired in war. The king had ordered one representative to be chosen from every family to serve the kingdom, and Roman, the one designated to enlist for the Dmitri family, had committed suicide out of sheer terror. With the battle-hardened soul of Baek Jun-hyuk, he had to admit that Roman was a pathetic wretch, but no matter how he lived before, the current owner of this body is still the sect leader of the heavenly demonic sect Baek Jun-hyuk, and as long as he can control this body, he will live an authentic life, just as Baek Jun-hyuk once did. Roman's mind never stopped thinking, while his hands remained busy relentlessly wiping out his enemies. The Blood Guild members had almost all been taken down by him, except for one small guy who was frantically trying to run away. Too bad his speed was no match for the sect leader of the heavenly demonic sect. Roman grabbed him by the hair, completely overpowering him. The bastard was scared out of his mind, screaming and begging for mercy. To bring an organization in line, one must enforce the law properly. "I won't take your life," Roman said calmly, while effortlessly snatching the dagger from his hand. "But you will still have to pay for your disrespectful words." As he spoke, he yanked the man's head back. The sharp dagger plunged straight into his eye. A horrific scream echoed out. The Blood Guild member was now blind. His small body trembled like a leaf from the pain, while the surrounding people watching the scene also couldn't stop shivering in fear. Roman took a deep breath, then spoke each word clearly. "My name is Roman Dmitri. If any of you are unhappy with the punishment, the way that I have dealt to them, you can come find me at any time." In his past life, Baek Jun-hyuk had climbed to the pinnacle of the martial arts world with his unstoppable power. Hundreds, thousands of martial artists came to challenge Baek Jun-hyuk, only to meet a single outcome. When their hot blood flowed like a river, it was the moment the whole world knew that the heavenly demonic sect had conquered this martial arts world. Baek Jun-hyuk had always been proud of his achievements, yet now he has turned into Roman and has to wander the streets just to deal with these small-time thugs. After finishing the job, Roman ordered Hans to call the guards to handle the remaining mess. He stared long and hard at his blood-stained hands, feeling extremely disappointed. Because this body is terribly weak, hardly any internal energy meridians, and the circulation is poor. Roman silently thought to himself that he must quickly gather information about this world, and then improve this body. Just then, the red-haired kid stood up shakily. "Young master, thank you for saving my life. Thank you so very much." "Don't misunderstand. I didn't do this to save you," Roman replied coldly. "The Blood Guild violated the laws of this land, and I only did this to punish them." Roman did not soften up just because he saw the young man was badly injured. He demanded the kid tell his story in detail, even threatening that if there was even half a lie, his tongue would no longer stay in his mouth. The kid, whose face was already swollen, began to recount his situation. It turned out the ones who really owed money to the Blood Guild were his parents. They had borrowed money from them to buy farmland. Originally, their family could have easily repaid the debt after selling their crops, but those Blood Guild guys played dirty by destroying all their crops, leading to their inability to repay the debt. Only later did the kid find out that those bastards did it on purpose because they were stalking his younger sister. At this point, pain and rage seemed to erupt. The kid knelt at Roman's feet and wailed desperately. "Even though we aren't well off, we have never harmed anyone. I beg you at least save my little sister." In those watery eyes there were many different emotions: rage, sorrow, and desperation. Looking into the young man's eyes, Roman felt like he was meeting the rage demon, one of the 4 heavenly kings from before. Thinking back, the first time he met the rage demon, it seemed to be in a place just as dilapidated as this. Memories from his past life drifted before his eyes. After a long while, Roman finally asked, "What is your name?" "My lord, I am Kevin." "Kevin, later I will verify. If what you just said is true, the events of today will be handled by someone appropriately." Kevin hurriedly bowed to thank Roman. A familiar feeling flickered, but it seemed like something was secretly telling him that he might have a long-lasting connection with this kid. At the same time, a sophisticated carriage was slowly entering the territory of the Dimitri family. Sitting in the carriage was a beautiful blonde young lady. She is Flora Roman's fiancée. Their marriage was decided a month ago, and of course it was just a political marriage. Because the territory ruled by Flora's family is very unstable, her father was forced to marry her off to a family with enough power. Flora strongly opposed it, but because she was born in an era where women had no voice, in the end she had to accept this reality. Obviously, Flora had no intention of spending the rest of her life tied to a family of nothing but blacksmiths, but because it could save her father, Flora had no choice but to bite the bullet. Originally, Flora was meant to marry the second son of the family, a man with a bright future. But that plan changed suddenly when the youngest son of the family, Roman Dimitri, forced her to marry him. Soon after, the carriage arrived and Flora stepped out fuming. In her eyes, Roman was just a decadent, good-for-nothing scumbag. Even though Flora was clearly aware of her family's current situation, no matter how many times she thought about it, she still felt Roman was beneath her. Because of that, when the two met, the first thing Flora said to Roman was, "Lord Dimitri, I want us to call off this engagement." Flora thought of this as an act of resistance. In her own despair, she still wanted to fight until the end. Surprisingly, right after that, Roman put on a face as happy as if he'd just struck gold, saying, "I think that's a great idea." Flora couldn't help but let out a loud, "Huh, what was this?" It was clear that Roman had forced her to marry him, yet now that she wanted to break it off, he was acting like he'd just won the lottery. What was going on? I have also given this marriage some thought. As the scum of the Dimitri family, I really don't dare to marry someone like you, my lady. So I think calling off this engagement is the right thing to do. The more Roman spoke, the more shocked Flora became, mixed with a bit of confusion and worry. Before Flora could even react, Roman was already rushing off to report the cancellation of the engagement to his father. She hurriedly spoke up to stop him. "Wait, I heard that you were the one who genuinely liked me and requested this marriage. Now you are willing to call it off without setting any conditions, so I'm a bit confused." "Well, do you want me to marry you then?" Not exactly." "Then let's not cause each other any more trouble. Let's both agree to break it off." "That's settled." With that, Roman turned and walked away decisively. He even insisted that he would take full responsibility for breaking the engagement. After all, for someone already carrying a bad reputation, bearing the title of the one who was dumped wouldn't make any difference. Flora stared at Roman's retreating back, still stunned. She had a feeling he wasn't like the scumbag from the rumors at all. Roman headed straight for his father's room, Lord Romero. Not long after, loud shouting echoed from inside. What did you just say, breaking the engagement?" "Just as I told you, father. I have already discussed it with the young lady of the Lawrence family." Romero was so angry his blood pressure spiked. He didn't hesitate to call his youngest son a fool. Even though people out there called Roman a dunce or the scum of the Dimitri family as a father, Romero had always tried to provide him with a good life, and Flora was a part of that good life. The political marriage with the Lawrence family was the best way for the Dimitri family to gain a solid foothold among the upper aristocracy. Moreover, Flora was famous for being beautiful and well-mannered. Your only job was to marry that beautiful noblewoman, and you couldn't even do that. What the hell is wrong with you?" Romero yelled at Roman, but it didn't even faze him. Roman just lowered his head, repeatedly apologizing, but that only made Lord Romero even more furious. He grabbed a ceramic cup from his desk and threw it straight at his son's face. Originally, if the marriage had gone smoothly, Romero intended to arrange for Roman's military enlistment, but since the engagement was broken, he would have to go to the front lines within 6 months. "Do you have anything else to say about this?" Romero thought his son would be like before, scared to death at the mere mention of joining the army. But now Roman just lowered his head and calmly said, "No, sir." Romero became even more livid. "I also heard you caused trouble with the blood-sucking gang. Witnesses at the scene said you punished those scumbags. But I don't believe it. Someone else must have helped you." Romero said this because the blood-sucking gang was an organization even he was afraid to provoke, and Roman was just a useless son who couldn't do anything right. He demanded that Roman solve the troubles he had caused himself, repeatedly stating that he wouldn't help Roman clean up the mess ever again. Romero's attitude was very aggressive, but it was essentially just a bluff. He thought his youngest son would kneel down and cry, begging for forgiveness again. But to his surprise, Roman just calmly replied that he understood and would handle everything himself. This was probably the most shocking thing in Romero's entire life. "These are the consequences of my own actions. I believe I can resolve this entirely, so after I've handled all the issues I will return," Roman said. Then he walked out of the room and slammed the door shut. At this moment, he took out a handkerchief to wipe away the blood streaming down his forehead. Flora was still waiting outside. She was so shocked that it took a while before she could speak. "Have you lost your mind? Are you still here?" Flora had heard the entire conversation between Roman and Romero, and what surprised her most was that Roman had challenged the blood-sucking gang, the ones bold enough to threaten the entire nobility. What Roman did could lead to a crazed revenge from the entire gang, and Flora feared that he wouldn't be able to handle it without her family's assistance. Flora advised Roman to go back and beg Baron Romero for forgiveness, but he coldly asked back, "Why would I do that?" Flora was speechless, and before she could say anything else, Roman continued, "Lady Flora, you should know who you are." Roman had found Flora annoying from the start, ever since Hans made him wear tight, cumbersome clothes and spray on sickeningly sweet perfume to greet her. Roman hadn't been in this world long, and he believed that marriage was something that would only bring him more trouble. But Hans was right. Roman felt he shouldn't be impolite to a woman who had never harmed him. The fact is, he still wanted to call off this engagement. It's just that he didn't expect Flora to suggest canceling it first, and with such a nasty attitude. If the other party didn't respect him, then Roman had no reason to respect her either. "Miss Flora, you seem like quite the arrogant one, don't you? I know where you come from, so you probably couldn't awe and care less about my situation when talking about breaking off the engagement. But the moment I said I would take full responsibility, you started getting worried." From beginning to end, only Roman had been speaking. On the other hand, Flora looked flustered and couldn't say a word. However, for him, from the moment the words, "cancel the engagement," left Flora's lips, she no longer had the right to interfere in his decisions. "From this moment on, we have nothing to do with each other anymore, so let's each handle our own business." Roman coldly walked away, leaving Flora in humiliation. The reason he said he would take full responsibility was to avoid any issues that might arise after the breakup, and because he also didn't want to get involved with Flora Lawrence anymore. Even though she was very beautiful, Roman still hoped this. It was the first and last time they would ever meet. "I've got so much on my mind, I'm way too busy to get married." Roman wasn't sad, but that evening someone back at home was. It was Lord Romero. He had been drinking heavily, even though his wife Lihanna had tried to stop him. The reason the Baron was so upset was because of the cup he had accidentally thrown at his precious son's head. "Lihanna, I hit Roman again. Back when they were commoners, he used to beat him often. After they became nobles, he promised himself he would never let his children go through that again." Thanks to this promise from Romero, their other children grew up in peace. But Roman was the most rebellious of them all, and he was also the one who gave Romero the most headaches. It's just that he was the only child who had gone through those hard times with his father, which is why he didn't know how to treat Roman properly. Lihanna believed that as a father, Romero still had many shortcomings, but they were the only ones who could correct their children's wrongful behaviors. She often had headaches over her youngest son's impulsiveness, but with a mother's forgiving heart, Lihanna still believed Roman would change, while Romero would never abandon his child. "Are you talking about the Bloodfang gang?" Lihanna nodded. She knew her son very well. Roman Dmitri was a proud child, and if he said he could handle the Bloodfang situation himself, he might just be boasting. As his parents, they shouldn't just stand by and ignore him. So Lihanna wanted her husband to send Captain Jonathan to help him. Romero found her words reasonable, so he immediately summoned Jonathan, but in reality that proud child was just all talk, and Lihanna knew he had disappeared. Roman said he could handle it himself, and in truth he really could, because right now he was aimlessly wandering the streets while Hans was feeling helpless. Young Master, the Bloodfang gang could come for revenge at any moment. "It's dangerous for you to be out like this. How about we go back?" For the past 2 days, the youngest master had been acting like he'd lost his mind, making Hans incredibly exhausted. Of course, no matter how much Hans pleaded, Roman had no intention of turning back. "Hans, think about it. Since when did the Bloodfang gang gain the power they have now?" he suddenly asked. Hans shook his head. He didn't really know, but Roman did. After returning home, he had taken the time to learn about these Bloodfangs. They started making a name for themselves through infamy by slaughtering their rivals without mercy, and those rumors made others fear them. That was what made their reckless behavior so effective. So what was the crux of the issue? The Bloodfang gang wasn't actually that hard to deal with. They were only dangerous when they could make people tremble before their blades. So today, Roman wanted to go out. He wanted to find out for himself just how much the Bloodfang's notoriety had affected the people in his territory. The two wandered around until they stopped at a restaurant called Atelier. After ordering a table full of food, Roman told Hans to stay and enjoy it himself. He wanted to go out to investigate further, because this could be dangerous for him. But Hans, who 10 seconds ago was captivated by the banquet, now stood up firmly. "That's impossible. Even if I encounter danger, I will never let the young master go alone." Roman was both amused and a bit touched. It seemed Hans was truly loyal. If not, he wouldn't have followed that foolish Roman for so long until the day he passed away. However, in reality, Hans couldn't help him much right now. He might even get in the way if Roman got ambushed by the Bloodfang gang. "Don't sacrifice yourself so meaninglessly. Just having you come out with me is more than enough. I'll be back soon." Roman left the restaurant, leaving Hans behind. He stood there for a long time, still dazed. He never expected his young master to say such things to him one day. Plus, he'd specifically ordered a meal for him while waiting for his return, as if the young master had suddenly become thoughtful. But suddenly Hans remembered something. He was no longer in the mood to eat and rushed out of the restaurant. Roman wandered the streets alone, thinking as he walked. He had learned something about the Bloodfang gang over the past few days. Their strength wasn't actually that terrifying, but because they operated in groups, it was very difficult to hunt them all down. After the Kevin incident, they were surely lying low because they feared the consequences of failing to eliminate Roman. He couldn't find them, so he had to find a way to make them come to him. That was the reason Roman had dragged Hans out to wander the streets today, then told him to stay at the restaurant to eat. Surely the Bloodfang's informants knew where he was by now. Plus, today is the scheduled training day for the Dmitri family guards, so the number of guards on the streets has been significantly reduced. Which means, if the Blood Gang is planning to take revenge on Roman, today is the perfect opportunity. Your calculations were spot on. And sure enough, after wandering around the streets waiting, the Blood Gang thugs really did come looking for you this time. They arrived in greater numbers, and of course every single one of them was armed. Meanwhile, Hans had rushed frantically to the Dmitri castle to meet the captain of the guard, Jonathan. Even though he had seen with his own eyes the young master taking on the entire Blood Gang by himself at the market a few days ago, Hans was still worried that if he kept wandering around, something bad would happen. "Captain, you have to find young Master Roman immediately," Hans said, panting from his run. "The young master is in danger." Although Hans's concern was justified, who was actually in danger remained to be seen. In a quiet alley, Roman was loosening up by beating the living daylights out of a few guys. who wanted to take him out. At first he only had his bare hands, but then he swiped a dagger from an enemy, making him even more formidable. With his combat experience and unwavering resolve from his past life, Roman quickly took one of them out without so much as flinching. This left the remaining assassins in a state of panic. What the hell is going on? Is this really the idiot from the Dmitri family we were told about? Ha! Roman laughed loudly. What are you idiots just standing there for? Come at me all at once. At the same time, Hans was panicking, explaining that the young master had gone off to fight the blood gang without a single bodyguard. But when Jonathan and the guards heard it, they could only laugh, finding it completely absurd. In their impression, Roman had always been the weakest person on Earth. How could he possibly be fighting anyone? It's the truth, sir. Why would I lie to you about something like this? Hans shouted. His seriousness actually made Captain Jonathan reconsider. Coincidentally, the Lord of Dmitri had also approached him not long ago to ask for this very favor. If only one person had spoken up, Jonathan might not have believed it, but with both of them mentioning it, he felt quite annoyed that the young master kept wandering off and causing trouble, even though he didn't know how to use a single weapon. Even though he really didn't want to, Jonathan finally had to order his men to arm themselves. Get ready to save the young master. Don't worry. As long as we're here, they won't even be able to lay a finger on young Master Dmitri, Jonathan asserted firmly to Hans, though deep down he was secretly irritated by all the trouble Roman caused. That was just when Roman finished slitting the throat of one blood gang member. The two remaining thugs, after a few seconds of shock, immediately lunged at him to finish him off, but their aggression was no match for the masterful skills of a veteran who had spent his whole life in the martial arts world. Even while being ganged up on, Roman remained completely calm. Very quickly, both of the remaining blood gang thugs were dealt with. One of them was kept alive. Roman seemed quite disappointed that they had only brought 3 people. Of course he left, the last one alive, to interrogate him. The knife in Roman's hand ruthlessly drove straight into the opponent's thigh, causing him more pain than death itself. As the opponent fell into a state of panic, Roman began his interrogation. All right, first off, who is your leader? With his experience from his past life, making a living person talk wasn't too difficult for Roman. After interrogating that piece of trash, he went alone to a tavern. The guys drinking inside saw Roman and their expressions changed immediately, especially since he showed up covered in blood. Welcome, young master. The owner greeted Roman proactively before he walked straight to the bar. Murmurs and whispers started to erupt around him. Roman heard it all, but just turned a deaf ear. The owner asked what he wanted to order, and Roman replied that he wanted to drink Dawn's Tear, the kind brewed from before the 20s. I'm sorry, sir, but our bar doesn't carry that. How about I introduce you to a different drink? That's fine. Just get me something really strong. I have things to do in the morning, so I need to get a little drunk. Roman's reply sounded unrelated, but it grabbed the attention of everyone present because it was a special code he had dug out of the bald guy's mouth earlier. According to him, they usually received missions at this tavern after reciting the correct code, and the code was the 3 phrases, Dawn's Tear, something really strong, and things to do in the morning, said in the exact order. After Roman did exactly as he was told, sure enough, the attitude of those in the tavern became hostile, including the owner. He was the first one to draw a knife and order an attack, but he was also the first one to collapse from just one punch from Roman. The moment the owner fell, all the patrons in the tavern grabbed their weapons and rushed toward Roman. Normal people seeing this couldn't help but feel terrified. They scrambled to leave the tavern, their mouths constantly shouting, "Call the guards, hurry!" Once the innocent people left, Roman had even more room to work with. Even though he didn't have a weapon in his hand, he still managed to take down 3 bastards in the blink of an eye. This made the rest of them hesitate. This didn't seem like the cowardly and useless Roman Dmitri they knew. As if reading their minds, Roman just smiled to himself. Of course, he was no longer the Roman they knew, but the leader of the legendary heavenly demon sect from his past life. Because he possessed the greatest martial arts techniques he had been strengthening, his current body's physique in just a few short days. Although Roman's current level couldn't compare to his past self, these flies couldn't give him any trouble. By the time Roman had finished off the whole gang, the owner finally crawled back up. "You've woken up just in time. I've also just finished dealing with this bunch." Young master, stop playing dumb. You're the one who attacked me first. Don't even try to deny it. Besides, it's just the two of us left here now. There are a few things I'm very curious about, so let's have a little chat. That barkeep didn't feel like he was standing in front of the useless young master of the House of Dimitri anymore. He was facing a true demon. It was so terrifying he couldn't even control his body. He was trembling uncontrollably. Not long after, Jonathan led the guards to storm the tavern, but the chaotic scene on the floor made it hard for him to stay calm. What on earth is going on here? Can this really be the work of the young master? While Jonathan did a sweep of the area, his men finished checking the second floor. There was only one person left, barely breathing, and he said that Roman had headed to the Lawrence territory. Why would the young master go to Lawrence? Jonathan was completely baffled. Wasn't Roman the one who just called off his engagement to Miss Flora from that family? He said the main hideout of the Blood Syndicate is in Lawrence, sir. Going back an hour, Roman had used force to coerce the tavern owner into telling the truth. At first, when he chopped off two of the guy's fingers, the man remained incredibly stubborn, refusing to spill a word. But this didn't make Roman angry. On the contrary, he was quite pleased. People who won't open their mouths even under torture, or even in the face of death, are the ones who hold the most valuable information. "You're just wasting your time, just kill me already." "Oh, so that's how it is. Let's run a little test to see if you're really that tight-lipped." "No matter what I do, force won't break this bastard." But family is a different story. Roman had already noticed the photo on the table. Based on the age of the boy next to him in the picture, he could guess it was his son. Roman used the child to threaten him, and sure enough, it worked. The opponent was so furious his hair stood on end, well, even though he didn't have any hair left. "You scum, a noble like you actually uses family as a threat." "Me," the bald guy yelled in rage. Roman didn't answer. Instead, he picked up the photo. He stepped closer. "I've learned some very interesting things about the Blood Syndicate lately. Do you want to hear them?" Indeed, over these past few days, Roman had gathered quite a bit of information. He knew that the members of the syndicate were willing to sacrifice their own lives just to get revenge. And they all had one thing in common. They weren't bad people at heart, but they were buried in debt to the Blood Syndicate. That's why they were turned into slaves for the organization. That wretched group pushes people to the brink and uses their families as hostages to control them at any time. Because of that, they have such a large number of members willing to die for the organization. The more Roman spoke, the worse the bald man's complexion became. He thought that even if he knew the truth, it wouldn't change anything. Why? Because the Blood Syndicate will hunt you down to the ends of the earth to get their revenge. Hey, think about it carefully. You should be careful about placing your bets, shouldn't you? Roman suddenly laughed and threw the picture frame down at the man's feet. The frame shattered instantly. "When I said I'd take your son's life, I was being serious. I swear it on the name of Roman Dimitri." Even then, he didn't hesitate to describe in vivid detail how he would end the boy's life in agony. This forced the bald guy to truly rack his brain to make a decision. Should he stay silent for the Blood Syndicate and let his son die in pain, or spill everything Roman needed? The final decision he made, well, everyone probably knows. Because by the time Jonathan arrived, the young master had already left for Lawrence, and at the Blood Syndicate's hideout, things were in total chaos after hearing the news that one of their branches in Dimitri had been wiped out. And the most humiliating part was that they were defeated by a young master, famous for being so incompetent that he couldn't even qualify for the Royal Sword Academy. "Where is Roman?" the leader asked. "He just left the Dimitri territory. I think he probably got the information from the tavern." "Is he alone?" "Yes." The leader found it ridiculous that Roman dared to come here alone. It meant he was severely underestimating their strength. He immediately ordered all remaining members of the syndicate to assemble and prepare for battle. It was vital to take Roman's life before the Dimitri guards could arrive. As he spoke, he kept growling. "Roman Dimitri, you dare to mess with our Blood Syndicate. Today I'm going to take your life and hang your corpse right in the center of the square, so..." the reputation of the Blood Syndicate can be revived. While Roman was busy dealing with this group of thugs, his would-be father-in-law, Lord Lawrence, was also struggling with a different problem. He heard that the Bacco family had recently borrowed a massive sum of money from the gold bank. The only reason for this action was that they were preparing for war. Furthermore, the royal family seemed to be siding with the Bacco family, which was why they were acting so recklessly. And if war broke out, Lawrence would surely lose. It must be said that the Lawrence family had lived and governed this fertile land well for many years, even though there were documents proving their ancestors had mortgaged this territory to the Bacco family. The elders of the Lawrence house never accepted that. But now even clarifying that fact would be useless since the Bacco house was already prepared for a fight. The only thing Lord Lawrence could do was refuse to hand over his territory to anyone. If the Bacco family didn't want to compromise, then the Lawrence house had to try its best to fight them off. That was why he had arranged a political marriage with the Dimitri family. At the mention of this name, the nobles brightened up. They had forgotten about this key name. Even though the entire Dimitri clan came from a background of rough blacksmiths, it couldn't be denied that they were now one of the wealthiest families in the Northeast. No matter how much the Bacco family borrowed, it wouldn't matter to be as wealthy as the Dimitri family. If the Dimitris backed us, the Lawrence family's position would be much more secure. That's exactly why the Lord had to send his only daughter to that man they call an idiot. Everything regarding the Dimitri heir Roman is for the sake of the Lawrence family's legacy. Lord, please don't blame yourself. You're right. A marriage alliance with the Dimitris is the correct decision. Flora had overheard their entire meeting from outside, but she didn't dare knock because she didn't know how to tell them that she'd called off her engagement to the Dimitri heir on her own. She was in a chaotic state of mind. One half of her felt guilty for disobeying her father. The other half felt she had made the right choice for her own happiness. Flora paced back and forth in front of the meeting room door until she finally gathered the courage to step inside and confess. Just as she was about to, a knight rushed up and shouted, "Lord, my lord!" He barely had time to greet Flora before storming into the meeting room. "Something major has happened, my lord." The major issue he had come to report was that Jonathan had led his own troops all the way to the Lawrence city gates, but the Lawrence knights refused to open them, unless Jonathan and his men laid down all their weapons. Jonathan, meanwhile, was burning with impatience, terrified that Lord Romero's precious treasure would come to harm. "If anything happens to young Master Roman, I will not forgive you people." "This guy is so annoying," the guard thought. "How could I possibly let you armed men storm into our city?" As the captains on both sides, one on the wall and one below, were arguing intensely, another soldier rushed over, gasping for air. "The Lawrence Plaza! It's absolute chaos down there." Because Roman, covered in blood, was dragging the leader of the Bloodfang gang by the neck, moving through the plaza, as if nothing were wrong, ignoring the man's desperate pleas for mercy. Just a little while ago, the Bloodfang leader thought this would be as easy as pie. He figured his opponent was just some pampered noble, all talk and no substance. What mattered was that he came alone while he had plenty of men all well armed and ferocious enough to die for the organization. The leader thought that even a fool could see he was destined to win, but that pretty scenario unfortunately didn't happen. Roman stormed into the Bloodfang hideout all by himself and then swiftly took care of all the small fry right before the eyes of the old gang leader. The man was so shocked he couldn't even stand as Roman approached with an incredibly intimidating expression. Only one thought remained in his head. I'm about to kick the bucket, damn it, he knew it. But he was so terrified he couldn't move. Even though he didn't want to meet his maker, his body wouldn't listen to him anymore. Standing before him was a true demon of destruction. The results were clear for everyone to see. Roman had beaten him to a pulp, leaving him with barely a breath of life, and dragged him straight to the plaza. He hauled the guy to the most crowded area and let go. The Bloodfang leader, who had once been so arrogant, was now humbly kneeling in the dirt, begging for his life. He promised that if Roman just spared him, he would do anything at all. "Even if I have to be your loyal dog for the rest of my life." "You want to be my dog?" Roman scoffed. "You should have said that before you showed me your fangs." With that, he aggressively kicked the man once more. The man's forehead slammed into the cold ground, and Roman roared, declaring the true identity of this scum to the public. The citizens were well aware. of the Bloodfang's cruelty. So when they heard Roman expose the leader's crimes, they were shocked and furious. The sins of the Bloodfang were laid bare, so before everyone here today, I will rip out the roots of this evil once and for all. Roman raised his foot. The more faint-hearted onlookers couldn't even bear to watch. Jonathan had just spurred his horse to the scene by now, but all he witnessed were the bloody, mangled remains of the gang leader. Soldiers rushed to report this to Lord Lawrence. They had allowed Roman into the territory because he was Flora's fiancé, but no one expected that about an hour later. He would drag a blood-soaked man into the middle of the plaza. After identifying him as Ben Millet, leader of the Bloodfang gang, Roman executed him in front of everyone. The elders, who were in the middle of a meeting with the Lord, were immediately in an uproar. Their reaction, like everyone else's, was that this was completely insane. A loser, like Roman Dimitri. How could he single-handedly capture the Bloodfang leader and execute him of all things? And most importantly, Roman had openly killed a man within Lawrence territory without the Lord's permission. This was an act of tyranny, and the family elders had no intention of letting this slide. But Lord Lawrence didn't see it that way. The only thing he cared about right now was that his future son-in-law had managed to wipe out the entire Bloodfang gang all by himself. This piqued the Lord's curiosity, and he wanted to see Roman immediately. Not long after, he was summoned to the meeting room. Roman looked incredibly imposing now with Jonathan by his side. Lord Lawrence got his answer the moment he saw his face. He assumed that Roman could only have wiped out the Bloodfang with the support of the Dimitri guards. "Greetings, Baron Lawrence. I am Roman Dimitri." Roman stood tall. Even while addressing someone of higher status, he didn't bow his head. Lord Lawrence didn't mind those tedious formalities. Instead, he wanted to hear from Roman himself why he had come to Lawrence territory to commit such violence. "A few days ago, the Bloodfang assaulted an innocent citizen in my territory, and I executed them on the spot." Roman began to recount the story from the moment he met Kevin. Behind the closed meeting room doors, Flora was hovering outside, full of curiosity. She called over a guard and asked why Roman was here, and why he had walked into her father's meeting room. "You don't know yet, my lady." The guard sighed heavily and recounted the story of what had happened on the street. Inside the study, Roman was finishing his report on how he had hunted down the Bloodfang. The more he spoke, the darker Lord Lawrence's expression grew. "Who gave you the authority to do this? You have no right to execute anyone on Lawrence territory." "I know, but Lord Lawrence, regarding this matter, whether or not the Bloodfeud gang can be completely eradicated is a question I find highly doubtful," Roman retorted coldly. "Ben Millet, the gang's leader, is neither a stranger nor a mystery. He is infamous in Lawrence for countless vicious crimes. Ben has been in and out of prison countless times, only to be bailed out every single time." These were all pieces of information Roman had gathered from the tavern owner, which is why he decided to come here and handle it himself, since he didn't trust the Lawrence family to do it. As soon as Roman finished speaking, Jonathan turned pale with fear. "If I may ask, my Lord Baron, have I truly done something wrong?" Lord Lawrence remained silent for a few seconds. Then he looked up and asked the person sitting closest to him, "Do you know Ben Millet? He is a criminal, but I truly did not." "No, he was the leader of the Bloodfeud gang, my lord," the man replied, looking flustered. "I see. I understand now. Then there is no need for us to discuss this any further. This whole situation would never have happened in the first place if the Lawrence family had a better way of handling things." In reality, Roman was right, even if he had overstepped his bounds. Lord Lawrence understood that clearly, so, even though it was a bit embarrassing, he couldn't punish him. He dismissed Roman and Jonathan. He didn't forget to promise them rewards later. As the study door opened and until Roman's silhouette had completely vanished, Lord Lawrence finally let out a hearty laugh. "So that's Roman Dimitri, is it? He's actually quite something." The other noble still didn't want to overlook Roman's abuse of power, but unfortunately, Lawrence had taken a liking to this bold son-in-law, and he was willing to forgive him, even though Roman had shown him absolutely no respect. Lawrence was even eager to call for Flora. He wanted to tell his daughter that her future husband wasn't a fool, so she could rest easy about the engagement. Meanwhile, Roman had dutifully mounted his horse to return home with Jonathan. On the way, Captain Jonathan couldn't help but ask, "Young master, did you really have to mock Baron Lawrence like that? We're lucky to have made it out of there safely. What if he had flown into a rage? Even though everyone thought Roman had just caused a massive catastrophe, he remained unfazed because he knew that what he did only served to prove that everything was due to the negligence and carelessness of the Lawrence family. Besides looking at the Baron's attitude, he probably didn't even know about the broken engagement yet, so he couldn't possibly punish his daughter's fiancé. Jonathan felt a chill down his spine, because the youngest son had suddenly become strangely intelligent. He was not only stronger, but the act of storming into Lawrence and causing a scene like that had been calculated from the very beginning. This raised a question in Jonathan's mind, as it did for many others, whether this Roman Dmitri in front of him was the same fool of the Dmitri family that he had always known. Along the way, Roman was lost in thought as he suddenly remembered his childhood. Born as the son of the heavenly demon, that meant Roman wasn't protected or loved by his parents like other normal children. His father had even callously thrown his son into a world where only the strong could survive. Roman had lived through beatings since he was small, fighting back step by step, rising from the very bottom of society. As dusk began to fall, they arrived at the Dmitri estate. The first thing Roman did was take a bath to wash away the stench of blood on his body. He felt as though his body had been completely drained of strength. It seemed being in Roman's body made him tire much more easily. However, after waking up in this new shell, Roman had experienced many new things, and most of those experiences involved the Blood Feud gang. To destroy them, Roman had annihilated everything that stood in his way in the most brutal way possible. Yet, even so, he didn't feel a shred of remorse, because when he was Baek Jung-hyuk, he was exactly that kind of person, someone ready to tear apart and torture those who blocked his path, using any means necessary to eradicate those with murderous intent toward him. That was the life he had lived before, and it wouldn't change just because he had become Roman Dmitri. But after this incident, Roman didn't want to go out causing trouble for a while because he hadn't fully grasped the rules of this world yet, and his strength had currently diminished quite a bit. As Roman racked his brain trying to figure out how to improve his strength, a servant outside announced that the Lord wanted to see him. Roman finished his bath quickly and changed his clothes. He prepared to meet his father. At the same time, in the study, Jonathan was recounting what he had witnessed at Lawrence to Romero. The Lord found it hard to believe his own ears, because until now, Roman had always been his black sheep. He was his only son, possessing no impressive talents. But when Romero was still just an ordinary blacksmith, Roman was also the one who loved him the most. He had even traveled a long way to the forge just to give him a piece of candy, simply because he was afraid his father was working too hard. It was because of those memories. Romero had always wanted to give Roman a happy life, showering him with affection, but he never expected that his own love would lead Roman astray. In fact, he had long given up all expectations for this youngest son. But these past few days, after hearing that Roman had taken down the Blood Feud gang, that hope he thought had died out began to burn once again. As they were talking, Roman arrived and knocked on the door. Romero heard his son's voice, seeming slightly moved. He didn't need to know what method Roman had used to fight the Blood Feud gang, but as long as Roman had truly achieved something on his own, then Romero was ready to do anything for him, as if to make up for being a flawed father. "Is that you, Roman? I heard you handled the Blood Feud gang all by yourself. Is that true?" Roman looked thoughtfully at Romero's expression. You can tell he's got high expectations for your answer. If you're honest, he'll see you in a completely different light, but achievements that far exceed expectations can come back to bite you one day. That's why for now, Roman wants to keep a low profile. He had originally intended to hide the truth, but memories from his childhood kept rushing back. Back then, when most children were protected and loved by their parents, he was thrown into a world where only the strongest could rule over everything, and he clawed his way from the darkest pits to that position of power by proving his absolute superiority. That's why in this life, Roman just wants to be loved and acknowledged. Finally faced with Romero's question, he bluntly admitted to his achievements, for he is the heavenly demon, a man who never hides his overwhelming talent. And so, right after that, Romero and Jonathan took Roman to the guards' training ground. The soldiers there were all baffled to see the useless youngest son suddenly appearing at the arena, and they were even more confused when Captain Jonathan announced that Roman had come to practice swordsmanship today. He ordered any soldier willing to spar with him to step forward. The crowd below swallowed hard with anxiety. In their eyes, Roman was just a fool. Nobody wanted to duel with him at all. If they couldn't control their strength and ended up hurting the young master, they might lose their heads. But the reason Lord Dimitri brought his son here goes back to an hour ago, when Roman claimed that he had single-handedly defeated the Blood Crimson gang. Even though this was the answer Romero had been hoping for, it still left him wondering, how could you possibly defeat the Blood Crimson gang? Roman's brain started racing, working feverishly to come up with an answer that was plausible enough so Romero wouldn't have any suspicions. So he lied, saying that he had actually been secretly practicing swordsmanship all this time, adding that he wanted to prove to his father that the guy everyone called the Dimitri fool could actually accomplish something on his own. Roman also rattled off information he had gathered about the Blood Crimson gang, while describing how he had lured their leader out and taken him down. The more Romero listened, the more amazed he became. The story proved that his son had not only improved in swordsmanship, but also knew how to plan with incredible precision. Plus, he was quite brave to charge straight into the enemy's lair. Romero was silent for a long time. He was so used to his youngest son being a good-for-nothing. Now that he had changed so drastically, to say he was impressed was an understatement. Romero had to use the word extraordinary to describe what had happened over the past few days. After a long, thoughtful silence, he finally spoke. "My son, could I ask you for one favor?" "Of course, father." Lord Dimitri expressed his desire to see Roman's swordsmanship with his own eyes, to see just how much his son had changed. And that is exactly why Roman suddenly appeared at the training ground. However, Jonathan had asked 3 times already, but not a single soldier dared to step up to duel the young master. Jonathan had a massive headache. He needed to choose someone skilled enough to subdue Roman to maintain the reputation of the knights, while also confirming the young master's talent. Of course, Jonathan was perfect for this. But as the captain of the knights, he couldn't just draw his sword for something like this. So Jonathan singled out one name, Creed, the vice-captain of the Dimitri Knights. As soon as he heard his name, Creed's face turned pale. His impression of Roman was, in fact, not very good. The first time they met was last year when he was out handling a drunkard, causing a scene and disrupting business at a downtown restaurant. The incident wouldn't be worth mentioning if the drunkard, who was slurring his words and throwing things around, hadn't been Roman himself. While stopping Roman's rampage, Creed took a full slap to the face. That very moment, he realized that this young master had never trained a day in his life. His strength was even worse than an average person's. It was pathetic. And Creed had completely dismissed Roman as a piece of trash who was just taking up space. Yet now he was forced to duel him. This made him feel both disgusted and conflicted. Creed tried to object, but Jonathan gave him no opportunity to do so. Young Master Roman was able to take on the entire Blood Crimson gang by himself. He is a rare talent. To ensure the match is fair, you are the most suitable person here. Creed knew the captain's personality. He had no right to refuse. So he had to grab a wooden sword and step onto the training ground. Just as Jonathan shouted the signal to prepare, Creed suddenly made a request. "I was taught that when you draw a sword, even in sparring, you must fight as if you are stepping onto a real battlefield. And no matter who the opponent is, you are not allowed to go easy or show mercy. If you accept this condition, I would be honored to spar with young Master Roman." Creed's tone was dripping with attitude. He felt that Roman absolutely could not have wiped out the Blood Crimson gang by himself. Since he was forced to spar with him, Creed wanted to use this opportunity to teach Roman a lesson. Captain Jonathan looked at the Lord, then back at the young master as if waiting for his input. But Roman wasn't nervous at all. Instead, he cracked a sly, wicked grin that made Creed boil with rage. Jonathan understood that smile was his acceptance of Creed's request, so he signaled both sides to get into position. Creed didn't know where a weakling like Roman got the guts to duel him. But seeing the man's confident look, it seemed the one who was starting to panic was actually Creed. The moment the word "start" was shouted, Creed lunged forcefully toward his opponent. His speed surprised the other knights, as this was the first time Creed had fought with everything he had. But on the opposite side, Roman's gaze suddenly turned strangely sharp, and he parried the first strike to the shock of Captain Jonathan. Creed was thrown off by the recoil from that parry and had to take a few steps back. A look of doubt that he couldn't hide appeared on his face. From the strength of that blow, from that last block, Chris could feel that Roman's defensive stance was incredibly solid and powerful. Is this really the weakling Roman he used to know? Chris frowned quickly, steadying his emotions. He couldn't understand how the young master blocked his attack, but right now only beating Roman into a pulp would satisfy him. So Chris launched another attack. This time, instead of blocking, Roman quickly dodged to the right. Chris's reflexes were decent, so he immediately changed his attack trajectory, but perhaps he was too hasty. He let his impulsiveness show. Meanwhile, Roman remained perfectly calm. Just when Chris thought he had found an opening, Roman dodged again, and by missing his attack, Chris exposed his own weakness. Roman countered with a powerful strike. Whether accidental or intentional, the sword tip stopped just a few inches from his opponent's face. Chris was terrified and immediately backed away, gasping for air. That move was way too dangerous. If Roman had gone just a little further, he would have been hit. The onlookers couldn't help but look on in shock. But Roman, the center of attention, remained very composed. Chris gritted his teeth. The Roman in front of him was nothing like the one in his memories. Not at all. From defense to dodging to attacking, he didn't show a single weakness. If it keeps going like this, Chris was afraid he would actually lose. Just thinking that, he cursed himself silently. What the hell are you thinking? Chris, your opponent is the idiot from the Dmitri family. And precisely because his opponent was Roman, Chris could not allow himself to lose in front of all these people. Before Chris could even regain his composure to continue the match, Roman spoke up first. I think that's enough of a warm-up, don't you? That comment was like a slap in the face to Chris. He had been struggling so hard just now, and to Roman it was just a warm-up. As soon as Roman finished speaking, Chris saw his sword right in front of him. The speed was terrifying. He instinctively raised his sword to block, but still faced great difficulty. Roman had absolutely no intention of letting his opponent recover. He began a relentless barrage of attacks. This extraordinary scene left all the other knights wide-eyed with shock, while Chris grew more and more desperate. He could only grit his teeth and try his hardest to defend against the young master's onslaught. On the other hand, Chris kept searching for an opening to counter. Just then, he saw an opening in Roman's chest. Seizing the opportunity, Chris stepped back to build momentum and lunged forward. But unexpectedly, instead of hitting him, he saw Roman flash a smug smile. At that moment, Chris realized something. Roman had intentionally left an opening to lure him in. Right then, the fear of losing caused Chris to lose his mind. Suddenly, the sword in his hand emitted a blinding green aura, and even Jonathan panicked and shouted, "Stop!" Boom! A massive tremor hit the training ground, sending dust everywhere. Lord Romero panicked immediately, his eyes frantically searching for his precious son. But when the dust settled, Roman was still unscathed, and he had even managed to deflect his opponent's aura strike. The result was decided. Chris, nearly exhausted, immediately fell backward, into the gaze of a triumphant Roman. To be fair, Chris's talent was not bad at all. When appointed as vice-captain of the Knights, he had amazed the team. With his young age, Chris was also a student personally trained by Jonathan. After only 2 years of sword practice, he could sense mana, and it took him only 3.5 years to become a 3-star Aura Knight. There were many rumors that Chris's swordsmanship was legendary. These rumors were true. Even Jonathan was very pleased with his student, because Chris had both natural talent, ambition, and strong work ethics. He believed that Chris would go very far in the future. Yet today, in front of everyone present at the training ground, Chris had been humiliatingly defeated by the man called the idiot of the Dmitri family. The moment he fell, everyone there was frozen in disbelief. Romero couldn't believe his eyes because Jonathan had always praised Chris as the most elite 2-star Aura Knight in this region. And Jonathan could believe it even less. Just a month ago, Roman was still a troublemaker. Someone who had only trained for a year or two couldn't possibly have such high-level skills, let alone in just a month. Watching how Roman fought Jonathan, felt those techniques must have been honed for decades. "My lord, please don't be too surprised, but it seems the young master is a swordsmanship genius. Jonathan said, his voice heavy with the thoughts on his mind. Meanwhile, Roman was calmly observing his defeated opponent, who was lying flat on the ground. It couldn't be denied that Chris knew how to take the initiative and fight aggressively against enemies. His focus in battle was also quite sharp. At this level, Roman was certain that Chris was fully capable of chewing up and spitting out the entire Bloodfang gang without leaving a scrap. No wonder Captain Jonathan was so proud of him. By the standards of the knights here, Chris was already an elite warrior. However, by Roman standards, Chris was the weakest of them all. Still, the final aura strike he unleashed caught him off guard. Roman hadn't even had time to think. Further, when the boisterous laughter of Romero pulled him back to reality, it seemed the Lord was basking in happiness and pride for his son. Captain Jonathan himself had said that his son was a genius at swordsmanship after all. Romero waved his hand, calling Roman closer. Now the Lord truly believed that he had single-handedly dealt with the Bloodfang gang, and he wanted to praise his youngest son because, having decided to achieve his first great accomplishment, Roman resolved to fulfill a personal wish. Hearing this, his father Romero was as thrilled as if he'd struck gold. "You said you have to go to the battlefield within the next 6 months, right?" "Yes, father, since we are no longer on good terms with the Lawrence family." Hearing this, Lord Romero immediately guessed that Roman didn't want to go to war anymore. "You mean you don't want to enlist anymore, right?" "No, father. I want you to grant me permission to choose my own men." Romero was stunned. There were only 6 months left until the deployment. He had expected his son to haggle, but Roman had stated outright that he wanted to go to war. Sensing that his son had seemingly matured overnight, Romero agreed to his request. He granted Roman the freedom to decide his own life. Taking advantage of his father's good mood, Roman decided to ask for one more thing. Naturally, his father agreed to this as well, which made Roman very satisfied. But there was someone else who wasn't. That someone was Chris. After waking up from a long period of unconsciousness, the first thing he was told was that the Lord had personally appointed him to teach aura to the young master Roman. Chris vehemently protested, feeling completely humiliated. After all, Chris had just had to use aura to fight Roman, only to be defeated by basic swordsmanship. It made Chris just want to find a hole to crawl into and hide. And yet, now the Lord wanted him to teach aura to Roman. This was an absolute insult. At first, Chris refused outright, but Jonathan had made a deal with him. He wanted Chris to teach Roman and find out what exactly had made the young master so different. If Chris took on this task, Jonathan would pass on all of his own secret techniques to him. Chris was so excited he jumped up despite his body aching all over. This was an incredibly lucrative trade. If he closed the deal, the master would teach him the secret to becoming a 3-star aura knight, even though he couldn't stand the sight of Roman. The condition was too tempting, so Chris finally agreed. That night, Roman returned to his room to enjoy his luxurious life. Hans seemed surprised that the useless young master he served had defeated the region's most outstanding 2-star aura knight. Ever since beating Chris, Roman had kept hearing people mention aura, but he didn't really understand what it was. He asked Hans about it, but even he wasn't quite sure. "Isn't that just the power to use mana, sir?" Roman fell silent. It seemed that in this place, that thing was called mana. He was certain that what Chris had displayed in his finishing move earlier was a form of surging energy. However, the way people here utilized their energy was completely different from Roman's world in his previous life. And regarding what they called aura here, Roman felt that it didn't seem very efficient. He didn't know why they used energy like that, but from that moment on, Roman had a new ambition to teach the people of this world about the true power hidden within their own bodies. So the next morning, Chris came to meet Roman with fresh wounds, still on his face and looking rather reluctant. Before they started training, he explained to Roman what aura was. Simply put, aura is a way for knights to use their mana. While mages use mana by storing it in magic crystals, knights store and circulate mana throughout their entire bodies. The person who first created the concept of aura was Emperor Alexandro. Unlike mages who store mana in different objects and forms, he was the first to discover that storing mana inside one's own body would strengthen that body's physical capabilities. An aura is the act of releasing that stored mana from within the body outward. Mana naturally flows throughout the body, and people can increase their strength by focusing and releasing that mana. However, Chris believed that learning the history of mana wasn't very important because only a select few were chosen to be able to use mana in this way. Only 1 in 1,000 people chooses to become an aura knight, and only 1 in tens of thousands can follow the path of a mage. So, checking if you have the aptitude is the most important part. The minimum requirement for an aura knight is the ability to sense mana. Chris also had to warn Roman that most people fail at this very first step. Even he, someone heralded as a genius of swordsmanship, had taken half a year just to be able to feel mana, and for a normal person, the process usually takes over a year. The more Chris spoke, the more Roman felt he was just bragging about his own genius title, which made him very impatient. Let's just start trying to sense the mana. Can you explain to me how you did it yourself? Of course, Chris replied with eyes full of hostility. He felt that Roman was being very proud and arrogant just because he had won one fight. But people had always known that swordsmanship talent and mana control talent were completely different things. Chris was eagerly waiting for Roman to be humiliated by failing to control his mana. But what Chris didn't anticipate was that Roman already knew how to sense mana. After all, he wasn't the original Roman Dmitri. He was Baek Jung-hyuk. In his previous life, Roman had already been a mage. Because of that, he was able to store a small amount of mana. However, if one only relies on what they already have, they will eventually decline and fade away. Roman wanted to try understanding the methods of this world first, so for now he obediently followed what Chris taught him. Roman focused his mind to the maximum. Doing exactly as Chris instructed, his entire body began to emit a blinding, golden glow. By the time the light was too intense to ignore, Chris opened his eyes in shock and was stunned. Roman's aura was so blinding it was enough to make someone go blind. Roman slowly opened his eyes. Everything was just as he suspected in this world. The way people use ki is completely useless. In the martial arts world of his past life, ki was used to completely purge all impurities from the body with the ultimate goal of storing that refined energy within oneself. However, in this world, they use a completely different energy system. They focus on mana and hope it flows through their bodies naturally without having to restrict or control it, like the rare precious QI of the martial arts realm. Ki is dry but powerful, while the mana of this world is abundant and gentle, allowing it to leave the body much more easily. If one had to distinguish between them, the method people here use for aura is similar to martial arts training. Roman didn't need to waste time comparing the two methods, because while training makes the body stronger, it only helps physically and doesn't help the practitioner store mana within the body. It's just that if one uses the aura method of this world, Roman would never reach the heights he did in his past life, even if he spent hundreds of years training. How could you do that? Finally, Chris couldn't hold it in anymore and shouted, "That thing that just came out of you, that was aura, right?" Because he was being so noisy, Roman remembered that there was still someone else with him. Chris seemed unable to accept the truth, that it took him nearly 5 years to manifest aura, while Roman could do it on his very first attempt. "Tell me the truth. Did you trick me? Did you pretend you didn't know how to use mana?" The more he spoke, the louder Chris got, filled with anger and frustration. As he spoke, tears welled up as if he had finally found the reason for his failure to beat Roman yesterday. "If you weren't hiding your strength, then none of this makes sense. It took me 10 years to become a 2-star aura knight." Before Chris's resentful question, Roman only chuckled. This made Chris freeze for a few seconds, his tears flowing even more. Chris's hands clenched into fists, as if he were ready to fight, thinking Roman was mocking all his efforts. "Let me ask you this," Roman said. "During the time you worked so hard to reach that goal, did you ever question the training method you were using?" Roman's sudden question hit like a slap, straight to Chris's face. "What are you trying to say?" Suddenly, Roman remembered a name from when he was still Baek Jung-hyuk. It was the Blood Demon. The Blood Demon was someone who in the past could destroy an entire sect in an instant, a person with huge influence over the martial arts world. In his past life, Roman and the Blood Demon had engaged in a fierce, prolonged battle. In the end, the Blood Demon fell to Roman, and today he seemed to see the shadow of the Blood Demon in Chris. Both chose to swallow their humiliation to be taught. Both chose to discard their pride to become stronger. That was the moment Roman decided he wanted to help Chris become stronger. At this, Chris seemed eager. After all, his strong drive to improve was undeniable. However, Roman was not the type to hold someone's hand and spoon-feed them. He just wanted to remind Chris that sometimes you don't have to follow the traditional way you were taught. If I have to spell it out for you, you'll be no different than you were under Jonathan's guidance. However, if you want to figure it out for yourself, follow me and observe what I do. Chris was shocked, not understanding why their roles had reversed so quickly. Originally, he was sent here to teach the young master how to feel mana, but now, Chris was the one who had to follow Roman to learn, in the next 6 months while I go to the army, observe how I fight different enemies and become stronger. If after 10 years you can still keep up with me, I'm sure you will find your answer. That was the last thing Roman said before they went their separate ways. That night, Chris sat in his room and thought for a long time. He remembered the first time he met Jonathan as well as the time spent by his master's side. Suddenly, Chris felt that Roman's words made sense. After a sleepless night, he finally made his decision. The next morning, Chris went to Jonathan early to express his desire. He wanted to go to the battlefield with Roman to become stronger. Jonathan didn't force him, nor did he ask for his reasons, because looking into Chris's eyes, he knew he had made up his mind. So Jonathan agreed, but he couldn't help but give Chris a few words of advice. From now on, you are no longer a part of the Demichi Knight Order, but I hope that when you are out there, you will still follow your goal of protecting the young master. Yes, thank you, sir, Chris replied resolutely. His eyes were incredibly determined. It made Jonathan suddenly feel relieved. It seemed like Chris was no longer the child who cried bitterly over his mother's death on the battlefield all those years ago. Because he had been with Chris for so long, Jonathan did not want his student to suffer any lack of preparation. Therefore, he decided to take him, to choose a secret weapon of his own before heading to the battlefield. While Roman and Chris were preparing what they needed to join the military out on the streets, the reputation of Roman was gradually echoing through the small alleys. The story of Roman personally wiping out the Bloodfang gang still made many people skeptical, but most importantly, it had reached Kevin's ears. People might not believe it, but Kevin believed it wholeheartedly. After all, he had once seen Roman wipe out an entire group of Bloodfang thugs with just a dry branch, so he believed that the young master could indeed personally clean up the entire Bloodfang group. Thinking of this, Kevin's tears suddenly began to fall. Did he do that just to keep his promise to me? No. There's no way he would do that for someone like me. But he really did wipe out those thugs, Kevin muttered while secretly wiping his tears. Hey kid, what are you doing? If you want to go home early, focus on your work. A shout rang out, bringing Kevin back to reality. Today he was also working as a porter to earn extra money. But after hearing the story about Roman, Kevin couldn't focus on his work anymore, because it seemed he had suddenly found his life's ideal. He also wanted to become someone like Roman, someone with enough strength to protect those around him when needed. Those dangers out there weren't just limited to the Bloodfang gang. Kevin wanted to become stronger to protect his family, but he didn't know how to become stronger. Kevin kept walking, and as he walked, he secretly wished that he would have the chance to meet young Master Roman once again, and indeed, heaven never fails those with good hearts. Kevin took a few more steps and heard, "Someone called my name." When he looked up, the person in front of him shocked him so much that he dropped the bucket of potatoes he was holding. It was Roman. He hadn't seen him in ages. Roman was the first to speak up and greet him. Kevin was completely flustered. It took him a few seconds to process the situation before he hurriedly knelt down. "Thank you so much, young Master Roman. Because of you, my family was able to survive this whole mess." Indeed, after Roman wiped out the bloodstained guild, Kevin's family could live in peace, and he had even found work as a porter. This is all thanks to Hans's help, Kevin thought, feeling even more grateful to Roman. Of course, Roman hadn't come here today just for some small talk. He wanted to propose a deal to Kevin if he was willing. With Roman's offer, he would no longer have to worry about his family situation. He would have a home, food, and even a comfortable life instead of doing this backbreaking labor. But the premise was, Kevin would have to follow and serve Roman. If he swore loyalty to him, Roman would not hesitate to provide him with all of that. Kevin didn't need to think twice. He immediately slammed his forehead against the ground with such force that it started bleeding, but Kevin didn't care at all. "I swear my loyalty to you, young master. If you want me to die, I will die at your command. If you order me to kill, I will kill no matter who it is. As long as you protect my family, my life is in your hands." This blood oath, made by Kevin, reminded Roman of another lunatic. He too only took orders from one person. As long as that person gave the command, he was ready to stand against an entire army of hundreds, and he would never go down until he had completed that mission. Roman observed Kevin for a long time. He was sure that this young man would turn out just like that lunatic. "Fine then. From now on, you are my man." Kevin was taken to the Demichi mansion with Hans, in charge of helping him get accustomed to his new life. From the moment the young man stepped into the mansion, his face was glowing. Perhaps it was because his wish to become Roman's attendant had come true. After handing Kevin over to Hans, Roman went to the library. He looked for every book containing information about Aura Knights. That was what concerned him most at the moment. Most of the books had similar information about the path of an Aura Knight. The first step to becoming a knight was to be able to unleash aura. That was the sign that you had become a 1-star Aura Knight. To become a 2-star Aura Knight, which was Creed's current level, you had to be able to use your aura to cut through solid steel. And so it went. The intensity and power of the aura would determine the knight's rank. Once you became a 3-star Aura Knight, you would be beyond common understanding and receive special treatment from the kingdom. That was Jonathan's current level. The books also wrote that currently on the Salamander continent, there was a 6-star Aura Knight, and there had never been any legends about anyone reaching 7 stars. Even among the top 10 greatest knights today, not all of them had reached the 6-star level. Reading up to this point, Roman was truly curious. He didn't know how overpowered a 6-star Aura Knight could be, when the strength of a 2-star knight like Chris was just like an ant to him, and even Jonathan, who was currently a 3-star knight, was only as strong as a second-rate fighter. Roman continued reading. It stated that someone who reached the 6-star rank would have abilities that surpassed ordinary people. The aura flames they could unleash from their swords had a range of up to 10 meters, and their destructive power was on a completely different level. Currently, only 12 people were said to have reached the 6-star threshold. They were treated like royalty, regardless of their nationality or race, and were known as the 12 Swords of the Continent. Roman's eyes were locked onto the words, 12 Swords of the Continent. From all the information he had gathered so far, it seemed they were the strongest people. The fact that they could reach this level while not knowing how to utilize aura effectively proved their talent. The books also mentioned mages. Their levels were not measured by stars like knights, but by magic circles. Those who reached the 7-circle rank were granted the title of Archmage. These archmages were considered demigods. They could walk through battlefields and disasters effortlessly, waiting for an opportunity to strike. A single spell of theirs could level the ground and darken the sky, and when fighting against numbers, they were even more dangerous than 6-star Aura Knights. Compared to Aura Knights, Roman was more interested in mages because magic was an ability that never existed in the world of martial arts. It seemed he already knew what to do next. That was to confront these people to get a clear picture of the situation. However, Roman did not have a specific roadmap for the future. He couldn't predict what would happen, so it only made the situation more dangerous. However, even so, Roman did not want to stand still. He wanted to gain experience to ensure he could live a life full of achievements in this lifetime. And so, Roman quickly mapped out his plans. First, he asked Hans to find a suitable place for him to train, and he led Roman to the workshop Romero used to use. After becoming a noble, Romero had forbidden outsiders from entering this place, so Roman could spend the whole week training here without being watched by anyone. "I don't need food or drink or anything else. However, you are not allowed to let anyone enter here. Remember this clearly. Unless my people are in such danger that they are about to die, no one is allowed to come near me." It was just a few simple instructions, but Hans felt an incredibly terrifying pressure emanating from his young master. After that, he entered the workshop and closed the door. It seemed Hans had laid out straw on the floor to make it warmer, although Roman appreciated his thoughtfulness. In reality, doing so only made the flow of chi more erratic. He cleared away the straw and sat on the floor in a meditative posture. Up until now, Roman had only awakened a little bit of mana. To use the techniques of the heavenly demon sect perfectly, he had to go back to the very first steps. That was to eliminate all impurities in this body. Roman focused intensely and began to circulate his energy. Not long after, blood started to flow from his 7 orifices. It definitely didn't feel very pleasant, but Roman could still push through, because he could feel the mana which should have been flowing freely inside him, stagnating, blocked by the impurities in this body far more than in any other average young man. But because he had foreseen this happening, he was mentally prepared, since Roman had already decided to live a serious life in this world. So he had to reclaim the strength from his previous life to protect what he had, and this was only the very first step. A week later, Viscount Lawrence led his daughter Flora to the Dimitri estate. He was eager to see his future son-in-law, but the servants just reported that the young master was busy. Lawrence sighed heavily and sat down. "As expected, they don't want us here. It looks like we'll just have to wait. Sit down, child," he said. With her father's permission, Flora sat beside him. Lawrence couldn't help but remind his daughter to be careful with her words, because today they were here to apologize for the mistakes they had made. Flora's expression today was not good at all. In fact, it hadn't been good since the day before, when her father found out his precious daughter had unilaterally demanded to break off the engagement with Roman. Although Flora had tried to calmly explain everything, she couldn't stop her father from flying into a rage. "I foolishly thought you were a smart girl. I never imagined you would do something like this. Do you even know what's happening to our territory?" At that moment, Viscount Lawrence felt deeply disappointed in his daughter. He didn't want to tell her that the Barco family had borrowed a massive sum of money, fearing she wouldn't understand. But things had reached a breaking point. Viscount Lawrence had no choice but to lay it out. The Barco family was preparing to start a war, and marrying into the wealthy Dimitri family was the only way for them to stand a chance against the Barcos. Yet the daughter he had the highest hopes for had ruined everything. "Our Lawrence family isn't exactly weak, father. Isn't that right? With the Dimitri family, we still have a chance, don't we?" Flora still wanted to salvage the situation, but her father just shook his head wearily. "It's true that if it were just the Barco family, then the Lawrence house would still have the strength to fight back. But the fact that the royal family has approved their shady orders, along with the way they lent the Barcos money without asking for any requirements or collateral, has proven one thing: this is no longer just a simple war between two families. My daughter, the people putting power into the hands of the Barco family, are the ones who want our house to collapse. Now that they have a justifiable reason, they will do everything to arrange it and devour it all. Our territory, our honor, and even you, the so-called flower of the Lawrence family." The brutal truth laid out before her left Flora with no way to refute it anymore. Actually, she had already partially known the current state of her family's territory and her father's mindset when he arranged the marriage, but she had still decided to push it all aside for her own selfish reasons. While riding in the carriage with her father to the Dimitri residence, Flora had forced herself to abandon those foolish thoughts. Now, even if she rejected the marriage to Roman, she would only end up losing everything later, and that is why the two of them appeared at the Dimitri estate. On the final day of Roman's seclusion for training, the two had arrived early in the morning, but by dusk, Roman still hadn't come out. Hans was extremely anxious. The father and daughter from the Lawrence family looked dissatisfied, but Hans didn't dare go against his young master's wishes because he had given very strict instructions. He kept pacing back and forth until finally he heard the creak of the door opening. Hans was overjoyed, but the look on the young master's face when he stepped out made him gasp in shock. In another development, after waiting for half the day and drinking cup after cup of tea, Viscount Lawrence finally couldn't take it anymore. Even though he had come here to apologize, having to sit and wait in vain had made him lose all face. Viscount Lawrence tried to clench his fists to stay calm, but they wouldn't stop shaking. The veins on his forehead were pulsing uncontrollably. After a brief internal struggle, Viscount Lawrence stood up abruptly and headed straight for Baron Dimitri's study. Roman's father, currently busy handling affairs, didn't bother to look up when he heard footsteps approaching. The study door was flung open. Viscount Lawrence stormed in with a furious attitude like a hurricane. "Baron Dimitri, what are you doing leaving guests waiting this long? If you're not satisfied with us, you could have just kicked us out. I didn't think you would be so heartless, Baron Dimitri." Facing the Viscount's questioning, Romero was silent for a few seconds. Then, he calmly dipped his quill into the inkwell. "I understand your anger, but did you make an appointment with me before coming here? I know we were wrong to decide to come without notice. But we talked to you about meeting him a week ago, and we had no other choice but to come ourselves, since he rejected our request and went completely silent." It was true, a week ago Viscount Lawrence had sent a letter requesting to meet Roman, but he never received a reply. Out of desperation, he had to bring his daughter here himself without warning. The result was having to wait half a day without a single word of explanation. Viscount Lawrence felt deeply insulted, and Baron Dimitri should have rejected their visit request from the very beginning. Viscount Lawrence's attitude grew increasingly aggressive. He spoke in a torrent like pouring cold water over Baron Dimitri's head. "Did you come all this way just to say you're angry about waiting for half a day?" After a moment of silence, Romero suddenly asked, and his cold tone made the father and daughter from the Lawrence family swallow hard with tension. Romero was no fool. On the day Flora visited the Dimitri estate, Roman had personally suggested to him that the engagement be broken off. Even without asking for the reason, even a 3-year-old child would know what had happened. Baron Dimitri also immediately guessed that Miss Flora was the reason. That made Roman want to call off this arranged marriage. What enraged him most was that the one who pushed for this political marriage was Viscount Lawrence, and the one asking to cancel it was none other than his own beloved daughter. This felt like a slap in the face to Romero, or more accurately, it was the Dimitri family that was being gravely insulted, yet Viscount Lawrence still thought that his anger was justified just because he'd had to wait a while. At this point, Romero couldn't hold back his fury any longer. He slammed his hand onto the desk, sending the inkwell sprawling. "We didn't want to meet in the first place, and yet you forgot your own mistakes and decided to come here and complain." The room fell deathly silent. Flora didn't even dare to breathe, and Viscount Lawrence also began to realize his move had been a bit misguided. Because the other party stayed silent, Romero continued recounting how about a month ago, the Bacco House had contacted him wanting to marry into the Dimitri family just shortly after the Lawrence proposal. They promised to help the Dimitri family connect with the royal family and give him a portion of land once they successfully took over the Lawrence territory. But Romero refused, even though marrying into the Bacco House would have been far more profitable. For one sole reason, the Dimitri family already had enough wealth and power to decide their own fate. And more deeply, it was because his son loved the flower of the Lawrence house. That is Lady Flora. That's why Romero decided to go against the Bacco House. Yet not long after the engagement was set, Lady Flora had run over here and thrown a bucket of cold water on him by calling off the marriage to his son. After Romero's long speech, Viscount Lawrence began to endlessly berate himself, wondering why he had lost his temper and made such a huge mistake. The Lawrence flower and the fool of the Dimitri house. Romero spoke with self-mockery. "It's true we both know they aren't a good match, but you should remember what the name Roman signifies. When the name Dimitri is added after Roman, its value has changed." Romero's words were filled with disdain, but he wasn't wrong at all. Furthermore, those who truly desired this marriage were not the Dimitri house, but in reality it was Viscount Lawrence and his family. Faced with the harshness of the Lord of Dimitri, Flora could only remain silent and bow her head low. Suddenly, she remembered the days back at the academy when she was young. That was the place where noble children went to learn and build connections. Back then, there was a family so small that their value was questioned by everyone, which made Flora pay close attention. It was the child of the Joel house. In a world where children thought they were born as treasures, the young master of the Joel house was the exception. One day he made a small mistake. If it were any other noble child, it wouldn't have mattered at all. But because it was young Master Joel, the academy opened an entire disciplinary committee for him. When Flora saw the teachers worrying about Joel's tiny mistake, a man who seemed to be his father appeared and apologized. He bowed his head very low, begging for forgiveness and promising to discipline his son again. The other children secretly snickered at the father and son of the Joel house through the glass door. Only Flora felt they were truly pitiful. Many years passed, and now she and Viscount Lawrence had fallen into the exact same situation as the Joels back then. This ironic situation made Flora feel truly ridiculous. Her father beside her was bowing lower and lower to apologize to Baron Dimitri. Flora felt that young Master Joel back then was very weak, and now her own family was the same. Flora had been silent the whole time, but the moment she opened her mouth to defend her father, the door behind her swung open. A servant announced that young Master Roman had arrived, and his new appearance made Flora's jaw drop in shock. After a week of training, Roman seemed to have grown quite a bit taller. His brown hair had turned into a silvery purple color, and his eyes had turned into a deep violet. In him one could easily see a touch of coldness, but he was undeniably much more handsome. "I've come to see you, Father. Father, I've finished my training." Even Baron Dimitri was stunned by this massive change in his son, but his successful plastic surgery appearance was not as important as the problem at hand. Romero wanted his son to personally participate in discussing the marriage, and since Roman had changed, he was willing to listen to his decision both as a father and as the head of the Dimitri house. "I understand what you mean, Father," Roman replied indifferently, then glanced over at Flora, making her extremely nervous. Roman had lived an entire lifetime. He was intelligent enough to understand what the connection between the two houses would lead to. In the current situation, where the Bacco family was threatening the Lawrence territory, the power of the Dimitri family would ensure the Lawrence house a way to survive. Roman said this far. Romero thought his son had changed his mind and wanted to continue with the marriage, but Roman kept his cold demeanor as before. He pulled out an exquisite handkerchief, wiping up the ink that had splattered from his father's desk slamming earlier, and said, "On the first day I met Flora Lawrence, my intentions regarding this marriage changed. Your father and you must have heard the rumors about the fool of the Dimitri house, and surely she thought that she couldn't marry someone like that." Roman's words were very calm, but they were like a knife piercing through the last bit of Flora's composure. His stance was also very firm that no matter how others judged Roman Dimitri, he still hoped to spend his life with someone who would only judge him after interacting with him directly. Flora had not done that, so Roman still wanted to end this marriage that no one desired. As soon as Roman finished speaking, the whole room seemed to be engulfed in a gloomy atmosphere. The most desperate person at this moment was undoubtedly Viscount Lawrence, because that arranged marriage was the final pawn for him to save his family. But his daughter had caused the Dimitri family to lose favor, and perhaps after this there would be no other family willing to become in-laws with the Lawrences. His family would have to face the Bacco house and the power behind it with the meager resources they currently had. This battle was originally quite evenly matched, but if the Dimitri family collaborated with the Bacco house, the Lawrences would have nothing left. To prevent that from happening, Viscount Lawrence decided to endure the humiliation to the end. Bowing 90 degrees, he offered one final apology, hoping a sum of money could make up for the mistakes his daughter had caused, but to someone who owned a lucrative iron source like Romero. That bit of money meant absolutely nothing to him. Romero also understood exactly why Viscount Lawrence wanted to use money to compensate him, so he told him there was no need for that. "As the head of the Dimitri family, I won't hold your choices against you. Regarding any issues that may arise in the future, we will make a public announcement. We will say that Flora Lawrence called off the engagement for personal reasons, and if that's the case, we will have no further reason to collaborate with your family." Viscount Lawrence let out a sigh of relief. After thanking Romero, the father and daughter took their leave. Before exiting the study, Viscount Lawrence couldn't help but steal one last glance at his former son-in-law. If he had known the boy was this valuable, he would have been far more careful about urging Flora to preserve the engagement. Even though he knew he had made a grave mistake, Lawrence could no longer salvage the situation. Once the study door had been closed for a while, Baron Dimitri finally had the chance to voice his confusion. He wanted to know what had happened to his son over the past week and why he had returned looking like this. Truth be told, anyone seeing this current version of Roman would be shocked. Throughout that entire week, he had shut himself away in the storage shed, conditioning his body by purging all impurities to enter the state of a mortal. In that mortal state, you need to prepare the body to become a heavenly demon mage. Although it might not seem impressive in the Murim world with the sheer energy existing in nature, in this world, the level of impurities in Roman's body was critical. Even just preparing the foundation for this body had significant effects, and the changes in Roman's appearance were the clearest evidence that he was completely different from before. But explaining all of this to Romero in words was difficult. Roman lied, saying he didn't remember all the details of his training process, but he believed that energy had already begun to circulate throughout his body. Romero was even more astonished, saying that energy circulation, a phenomenon where natural energy flows through the body to enhance physical capabilities, only happened to a rare few. Yet Roman, who had always been called the Dimitri idiot, had actually managed to do it. His growth was beginning to exceed Romero's understanding, leaving him slightly skeptical. But even so, he couldn't change the fact that Roman was his son. Therefore, he could only continue to place his faith in him and offer his support. Never forget the fact that your name is Roman Dimitri, and I am Romero Dimitri, your father. I will certainly help you with whatever you need. Those were just very normal words, yet they moved Roman deeply because in his previous life, his father had been a cold and authoritarian man. Now Romero was protecting and supporting Roman unconditionally. This feeling was not bad at all. After finishing his talk with his father, Roman left the study. Unexpectedly, Flora was still waiting outside. She looked hesitant, but the lady of the Lawrence house didn't stay to keep begging for the marriage. She just wanted to offer a belated apology to Roman for rashly judging him and causing so much trouble for both families. From beginning to end, Roman felt absolutely nothing toward this beautiful young lady, and he had no intention of continuing the marriage either, so the apology was unnecessary. But Flora kept pursuing him, explaining the reason why she had unilaterally called off the engagement during a social gathering organized by the noble families of the Northeast. Flora had heard rumors that she would be engaged to a member of the Dimitri family. It wouldn't have been worth mentioning if the rumor hadn't spread so quickly and taken such a negative turn. She could have accepted marrying a useless playboy. But the most important thing was that in those rumors, people were saying that young Master Roman was a drug addict, and Flora felt she couldn't live with a person like that for the rest of her life. When she said these things, Roman's expression remained icy, because regardless of the reason, it couldn't change the current relationship between the two of them. After that, Roman coldly walked away, but truthfully, what Flora said back then did weigh on his mind. Drugs are something that erode both the physical body and the human mind. The original Roman Dimitri possessed a body as limp as a noodle. That was easy enough to understand if he had truly been an addict. But ever since he possessed this world, Roman hadn't felt any drugs circulating in this body. Even though he did indeed have signs of having used drugs to end his life, those substances had completely left his body after he finished his week of intense training. Since reasoning it out on his own led nowhere, Roman decided to ask Hans directly, "Have you ever seen me use, or was there any situation that made you suspect that I was using drugs?" Nani Hans jumped out of his skin at Roman's sudden question. Roman insisted that he wasn't joking. Of course, he couldn't just blurt out that he was a transmigrator and was trying to learn about the history of this body's owner. So Roman made an excuse, saying he was reevaluating his past behavior from the objective perspective of an outsider. Hans didn't understand why his young master had changed his ways so quickly. But thinking it over carefully, although he had never seen it with his own eyes, there really was a period when Hans felt Roman's behavior was quite strange. The incident happened about a month ago, right when Roman had just returned from a social party back then. His behavior was so strange. He looked both guilty and terrified throughout that period. Roman seemed to have lost all will to live, staying holed up in his room and demanding Hans bring him massive amounts of alcohol every night, which made Hans genuinely suspicious that the young master might be using drugs. Roman listened intently, and combined with what Flora had said earlier, he also began to grow suspicious of Hans. "Do you know who is hosting that party?" "Yes, it's the eldest son of the Bacco family young master. His name is Anthony Bacco." This made it even more suspicious. Originally, Roman was arranged to be engaged, to Flora Lawrence, and after attending a social party hosted by the Bako family, his mental state changed abruptly, ultimately leading him to end his own life. The reason that drove Roman to take his own life kept gnawing at Baek Jung-hyuk's mind. In the suicide note he left behind, the only thing mentioned was that Roman was terrified of having to go to the battlefield, but at that time he was already betrothed to Flora, and in reality there were many ways for nobles to avoid the battlefield once married. So did Roman really choose to end his life? Just because he was afraid of the war? This doesn't make any sense at all. Hans, it seems like Anthony Bako and I are quite close. Roman continued to probe. Hans shook his head. The two of you were never close, but ever since you got engaged to Flora, Anthony seems to have taken a special interest in you. That's easy to understand. Because the political marriage between the Dmitri and Lawrence houses was a major obstacle for the Bako family, who were eager to seize control of the Lawrence territory, and the easiest way to solve that problem was to break off this marriage. They probably stopped at nothing to mess with Roman, and that led to him taking his own life. Mentioning this, Hans suddenly remembered something else. A few days ago, the Bako family sent an invitation to a party, but it overlapped with the time Roman was in secluded training, so he didn't know what to do with it. Roman couldn't help but admire the shamelessness of the people in that family. They tried to destroy the other party once and failed. Yet they still want to make a move. Ironically, Roman is the type of person who isn't afraid of anyone. This party will be held in 2 weeks, and he ordered Hans to send a reply to the Bako family immediately stating that he would definitely attend. The next morning, Hans brought Kevin to meet Roman. He didn't forget to warn him not to look too surprised when he saw the young master's new appearance. But when he saw him with his own eyes, Kevin was still stunned for a few seconds. It wasn't just the change in appearance. Roman's aura had also leveled up, making Kevin gasp in admiration. "How have you been lately?" Seeing Kevin arrive, Roman stopped his sword practice and took the initiative to speak first. "Ah, yes, young master. I've gotten used to everything here." Speaking of which, Kevin looked tense. "But I always wonder what is my role during my time here. I'm not sure if there's anything I can do for you." This was truly something Kevin had been agonizing over for the past week. Before, he had sworn that his life belonged to Roman if the young master protected his family. But after arriving at the Dmitri mansion, Kevin started to doubt whether an ordinary person like him had anything to offer. Coincidentally, Roman called Kevin over for this very reason today. This was the day he decided what use Kevin would have in his life. However, he didn't want to dictate the path the boy would take himself. Instead, Roman gave Kevin 2 choices. First, if he was afraid of holding a sword and shedding blood, he didn't have to become his sword on the battlefield. Instead, Kevin could follow Hans and learn to become a perfect butler, just sticking to working around the mansion. Second, Kevin could become Roman's sword and protect his master. This seemed difficult because he hadn't even touched a sword before. Furthermore, if he decided to commit to this path, Roman would have to test his willpower using torture methods. The first was the method of crushing limbs. As the name suggests, it is a method that causes extreme pain, as if the bones and muscles are being ground to dust. If he could persevere through that process, Kevin would prove he was worthy and valuable enough to stand beside Roman. The second method was for him to take Roman's sword himself and sever his own limbs. In that situation of self-inflicted agony, his true strength would be unlocked. Kevin could become strong and possess speed that no one could match. In his past life, the angry demon also started as a wanderer on the streets and became one of the 4 heavenly kings solely through his own willpower. And now Roman wanted to use that same method to test Kevin, someone he thought was a bit like the angry demon. "No matter what you choose, I am certain I can still make use of your value. How I use you is something you must decide for yourself." Roman's words echoed, but Kevin's ears were ringing as he stood before this dangerous and most important choice. Countless memories from his childhood flashed through his mind. Kevin was born in a dilapidated shack that could collapse at any moment, right near the Dmitri castle. When he was young, he had to follow his father and do any job just to survive. So by the time he grew up, Kevin had learned how to do almost everything. However, his life was still at a standstill, and it was extremely miserable because he had to face bullying from those stronger than him, like the Blood Gang. For a long time, Kevin understood that this was the life the weak had to endure. That is why he never dared to let himself forget that fateful day, the day young Master Roman Dmitri used a dry branch to defeat the entire blood gang on the street. That incredible power had completely won Kevin over. He trembled as he picked up the sword from the ground. Kevin didn't understand how cutting off his own limbs could help him, but as long as it could make him stronger and help him escape this miserable life, now possessing power like Roman's, he turned the blade in his hand until it shone, leaving Kevin extremely tense. Saying he wasn't afraid would be a lie. The boy took a deep breath, almost using up all his courage. With my whole life on the line, I'll lift this sword. In another turn of events, someone else was feeling restless, Chris, who had chosen to leave the Knights. He followed the young master, but Roman responded by disappearing for an entire week, leaving Chris very impatient. Today, catching Hans, Chris anxiously asked where the young master was, only to find out Roman was talking to Kevin and had ordered that no one be allowed in. Chris was in a bad mood, acting just like a royal consort suddenly falling out of favor. Who is Kevin? At that moment, a scream from the training grounds echoed. Blood stained the blade, and he collapsed to the ground that evening. Hans was startled when he saw that blood-stained sword. Young master, when were you injured? Nothing to worry about, I'm fine, that wasn't my blood. For the first time, Hans saw such a satisfied smile on his young master's face. Of course, Roman didn't have the supernatural power to make Kevin's arm grow back, so he wouldn't let him actually cut his own arm off. At the moment, Kevin was about to slice his wrist. Roman had pulled him into an illusion, using the Demon Shadow's allure spell. In the illusion, everything played out as if it were real, even the pain. But in reality, none of it actually happened. Roman had witnessed Kevin's recklessness firsthand. He had swung his sword toward his wrist before entering the illusion. If Roman's spell had been even a little weaker, or a second too slow, Kevin would have actually cut his arm off. But through this event, his value was proven. Roman now had two valuable cards in his hand, Kevin and Chris. From now until the banquet there were 2 weeks, and until the war began, there were 6 months left. He had to make the most of this time to teach them a lot of new things. The next day after Kevin recovered, it was time for Roman to teach him the mana enhancement technique. It wasn't a normal technique, but the very method the Demon King had once used. Although powerful, it was also dangerous, because it could erode the user's soul. Those who mastered mana enhancement could unleash incredible strength even under excruciating pain. And even if they had their limbs severed, they could never lose their will. That was the reason Roman had tested Kevin like that yesterday. In his past life, the Demon King was Roman's right-hand man. He had mastered this technique while enduring that extreme agony. Now he had found someone just like him, this young man Kevin. But before teaching him mana enhancement, Roman couldn't help but give a few warnings. As this technique develops, the pain you must endure will also become more intense. Of course, he also had his own reasons for teaching Kevin this technique, because it was the fastest way to teach a teenager who knew nothing, not even the basics of mana. If he mastered mana enhancement, Kevin would be fully capable of protecting everything around him. Hearing this, Kevin's eyes lit up. To him, Roman was like a god descended from heaven. He not only saved him from the lashings and wiped out the Bloodfang to protect his family, but was now even teaching him secret techniques. Kevin's gratitude was so great it couldn't be put into words, but along with that came a deep hesitation. Young master, why do you trust me so much? I have sworn to give my life to you, but I haven't shown you anything yet. I could just run away after learning this technique, you know. Kevin's confusion was understandable, but Roman didn't answer. Instead, he gave him another day of rest before official training began. Thinking back, the Demon King had asked him the same question in their past life, and he hadn't answered then either, because Roman knew Kevin would never betray him. Just like the Demon King back then, when it was time to be stronger, they would learn exactly what a high price there was to pay for betraying the Heaven Demon. The next morning, their first lesson began, but strangely, Roman didn't teach Kevin anything profound yet. Instead, he taught him basic swordsmanship. This made Chris feel a bit annoyed. He didn't know where this strange kid had popped up from to steal all of his young master's attention, leaving Roman not even sparing him a glance, much less teaching him anything. Chris followed Roman because he wanted to get stronger quickly, but with Roman treating him like air. Chris started feeling restless. The kid swinging a sword next to the master is even better than me. Should I beg the master to take me back? And Chris stretched languidly, but thinking of the words Roman had said to him, before he felt it was better to be patient and wait a little longer. And so Chris swallowed his frustration. The next day, he still came to watch Roman teach Kevin swordsmanship, then the day after that, and the day after that, and many, many days after that. Roman still showed no signs of intending to teach Chris anything. Finally, he exploded. "Young Master Roman, I've decided to follow you for 2 weeks now. The first week it was because you were busy with your seclusion. After that, you brushed me aside to train this brat. If you're doing this because I was rude to you at the beginning, I honestly apologize, so please teach me too. I am confident I can learn anything you teach." Chris poured out all his frustration like a machine gun, but Roman didn't show the slightest flicker of emotion. "Didn't I tell you already? You just have to observe me and learn." Chris stood there with his jaw dropped in shock. Roman had indeed said that, but he never thought it would be taken so literally. It turned out that for the past 2 weeks, Chris had been ignored, because Roman actually intended for him to just let him watch and learn from me. Seeming to understand Chris's hesitation before the lad could speak up, Roman explained first, "I know. Everyone learns differently. Take Kevin, for instance. He doesn't know a thing. So until he hits a certain level of achievement, I have to guide him from start to finish. But Chris, you're different. No matter what I teach you, you just force yourself to rote memorize it, instead of trying to understand it. So do you want me to keep watching you?" "No," Roman replied, then tossed a wooden sword to Chris. While Chris was still bewildered, Roman made an even more shocking demand. Chris had to spar with Kevin. This request made both young men drop their jaws. Above all, it felt like an insult to Chris, as he was already a 2-star Aura Knight, while Kevin was just a kid who knew nothing about swordsmanship or mana in this fight. "Even if Kevin is your opponent, I will teach him how to defeat you. Basically, Kevin is my copycat. If you still think you're right after this match, I will personally instruct you." Chris tried to suppress his anger. In his head, a string of beep-beep sounds began, all cursing Roman naturally, but wanting to prove himself, Chris ultimately accepted the match. "Fine. Right here I'll prove to you that I'm not someone to be toyed with." And so a 2-star Aura Knight and an apprentice stepped into the arena. Roman stood behind Kevin. Just as expected, the moment he stepped onto the mat, the lad's limbs went weak. Roman chose his words to encourage him. "I know you're at a disadvantage, but if you lose this fight, what do you lose? Nothing. There are countless people in this world stronger than you, the bloodline family, those who oppress your family with force, or Chris, who is eager to defeat you to win my approval. Them. There's no difference between them. So do you intend to just stand there and take it every single time?" Roman's words seemed to strike Kevin's weak point, instantly flipping his battle switch. Kevin raised his sword and took a stance. This only made Chris more annoyed. Not in his wildest dreams did he think he'd have to fight a total beginner like this. Moreover, the opponent's eyes were full of vitality, as if he actually had a chance to win. If Roman wants to tame me with this match, then Chris Quick is not going to give him the chance to do it. When the word "start" rang out, Chris rushed toward his opponent with intense fury. Given his overwhelming speed and strength, Kevin was no match. That much was clear as day. But the premise of that was when they fought alone. But in this match, Kevin had Roman supporting him from behind. Right before they started fighting, he had heard a voice ring out in his head. "Defend your front with your sword. Chris is going to strike unexpectedly. No mistake about it." This was Roman's voice. He was pointing out every move in the fight for Kevin. With this guidance, Kevin successfully blocked Chris's first blow. Roman continued to guide him, stepped to the side, then aimed for Chris's chest, just as the opponent prepared to throw a kick. Roman predicted the move Chris would pull, but Kevin couldn't react in time. In the end, he still took Chris's hit and fell backward. Roman demanded he stand up and keep fighting. Meanwhile, he continued to use telepathy to secretly guide him. "Roll to the right fast." Kevin didn't have time to think. He immediately followed suit, and this roll to the right helped him dodge Chris's next attack. Chris looked surprised to see Kevin escape, then turned and aimed straight for his opponent's left chest. Kevin obediently followed along. With Roman's guidance and the fundamentals he had learned over the past week, Kevin's attack also made Chris have to be cautious. However, Chris was still the one with far more combat experience, so as soon as Kevin countered, he took another kick. He clutched his chest, trying to endure the pain. Just now, Chris had indeed revealed an opening. It was just a pity that Kevin's sword swing was too slow, which is why it was parried. "Block the strike from above!" Roman's voice rang in Kevin's head again. Out of reflex, Kevin brought his sword up to block. Under the opponent's massive pressure, Roman guided him to slide to the right to dodge. But before Kevin could do it, he took a knee straight to the face. Blood poured from his nose and the pain left him dizzy. As for Chris, he was also getting quite exhausted. Chris didn't know anything about Roman using mana for telepathy on his opponent, so Kevin's resistance surprised Chris. Roman stood on the side, observing very intently. He also knew Kevin was no match for Chris, because his body couldn't keep up with his instructions. Meanwhile, Chris reacted quite agilely. But this situation is actually quite interesting. Over on this side, Kevin was struggling to stand up once more. Even though he was getting beaten up, he was quite excited to see young Master Roman in absolute control of this match. Because even though the opponent was a 2-star Aura Knight, Roman could still accurately grasp every single move. Kevin also quickly realized the issue lay in his own body, and if he could do exactly what Roman instructed, defeating Chris was entirely possible. Chris was currently no different from a puppet being held in Roman's palm, and Roman was just playing with him as he pleased. As for Kevin, this lad was the toughest of the tough, so even though he was getting hammered, he still had the strength to stand up. Each time Kevin felt he had adapted a little more to Roman's guidance. This gradually made Chris lose his cool. Even though he was trying to defeat his opponent, Kevin kept dodging blows and even countered at crucial moments. If one said this was just a coincidence, it was too hard to believe. On the other side, Kevin was feeling quite triumphant, because even Chris, who was considered the most brilliant genius of the Dimitri Knights, is struggling against Roman's abilities as he experiences the true level of his master firsthand. Kevin feels even more convinced that following him was the right decision at that very moment. He has sworn that this is the man he will honor as his master forever. And even if Roman were to ask for something unreasonable, he would blindly obey all for the burning desire to become the sword in Roman's hand. Kevin's determination grows ever stronger, and he understands that the key to achieving that is to possess a will stronger than anyone else's. Kevin grips his sword tightly and charges back into the fray. This is a lopsided battle. Naturally, a deficit in speed cannot be overcome in a single day, let alone within a few hours of sparring. So despite Roman's guidance, Kevin is still significantly outmatched by Chris. The two of them keep clashing for a long time, until Kevin is beaten black and blue. Chris really doesn't want to keep fighting, because if he continues, part of Kevin's body might end up crippled. But unfortunately, his opponent is desperate enough to risk his life. Even though he is severely injured, Kevin has no intention of stopping, determined to fight to the bitter end. Kevin's stubbornness makes Chris's blood boil. If that's really what you want, then I'll give you what you're looking for. From now on, every time you look at your deformed arm, you'll regret this. Chris lunges straight for Kevin's left arm, but the exact moment he strikes at top speed is when he leaves his chest exposed. Roman doesn't just tell Kevin to dodge. Instead, he orders him to charge straight forward and attack with all his might. Chris completely miscalculates his opponent's audacity. He stumbles to one side, barely managing to avoid the blow. But because of that, Chris loses control of the situation. It's not over yet, and before Chris can regain his balance, Kevin continues to attack aggressively. In Chris's eyes, it's just a crude, sloppy attack, and with 10 years of combat experience, he naturally wouldn't get hit. Chris tries to counterattack, but Kevin blocks it. Their current positioning accidentally puts Chris at a disadvantage, and just as Roman thinks Kevin has succeeded, Chris predicts the opponent's next attack. He pours all his strength into one final blow. Kevin's sword is knocked away and he officially lies flat on the ground. Roman's mood is complex, seemingly a bit satisfied, because Chris guessed that Kevin's second attack was just a feint and successfully countered it. You win. As promised, starting tomorrow I will personally train you. This is your choice. Roman tosses that line out, then picks up the unconscious Kevin and leaves. Late that afternoon, Chris returns to his room in a foul mood. Why on earth did I decide to fight that apprentice? Chris mutters. Winning that match gained me nothing. It wasn't just a waste of time I even lost at the last second. That's right. Chris feels like he lost. Even though he knocked Kevin out, Kevin's final attack was exactly the same move that caused Chris to lose while sparring with Roman 2 weeks ago. It was a day he would never forget, and if he hadn't had that experience with Roman, he feels he wouldn't have been able to defeat Kevin. In that situation, it's truly ridiculous. But thanks to that sparring session with Roman 2 weeks ago, Chris was able to beat a novice. Haha. He lets out a self-deprecating laugh. Have I matured just from that single experience? The next morning, Chris arrives at the training ground very early, even though he hardly slept all night, busy tossing and turning in thought. After all those tangled thoughts, Chris made a decision and wanted to arrive early to tell Roman that he didn't need any instruction. Instead, Chris wanted to find a way to grow stronger by observing Roman. Chris feels he truly had an epiphany during yesterday's sparring. He initially thought Roman wasn't helping Kevin, but thinking back, Kevin being able to perform those blocks and attacks so smoothly was impossible. When he thinks about it, Roman guiding Kevin during that match was actually creating an opportunity for Chris to learn and grow on his own. Roman is truly no longer the failure of a young master that Chris once knew. Although he doesn't know exactly what happened, Chris knows that the current young master has reached a level that even Captain Jonathan cannot touch. The observation and learning he speaks of is self-enlightenment while watching him. After all, what one deduces for oneself is remembered longer than what one is taught. That is the reason for Chris's decision. Chris makes this decision, and Roman seems quite pleased to see that he has had a change of heart, so he continues his work of hand-holding Kevin, while Chris continues to stand on the side and observe the two of them. Time passes and the day of the social party organized by the Baron's family arrives. Gone so far just to return and nearly went away for good. But this return seems a bit different. A week before the social party, everyone is gossiping excitedly. Did you hear it's about Roman Dimitri? I heard his engagement to the Lawrence family was broken off, followed by jeering laughter. Clearly it was the Lawrence family's fault according to the Viscount's announcement. The young man accompanying him joins the conversation. That's just a pretext. I bet he felt sorry for his precious daughter after seeing the Dimitri fool. The scene shifts elsewhere. A noblewoman holds her teacup. But breaking an engagement when the war with Draco is imminent, if he suspects that it only means the eldest son of the Dimitri family is even worse than the rumors say. The servants are also gossiping. But I even heard he took down a blood orc. Hearing that the other turns back and says, "Give me a break." You actually believe that that's probably just a way they're using to save face after being dumped. The scene shifts elsewhere. A loud laugh echoes throughout the mansion. Anthony says loudly, "I can't believe Roman actually broke off this engagement. He is too easily manipulated." He raises his glass. Roman has already accepted the invitation to attend the upcoming party, right? He's so easy to manipulate. By the way, has Roman accepted the invitation to the upcoming banquet yet? His servant replied, "Yes, we have received the invitation from Dimitri." Anthony smirked. Good, everything is going according to plan." He took a sip. "I'm really looking forward to next week. It's been a long time since I felt this excited about a party." On the day of the social gathering, Roman looked thoughtful. He asked, "Hans, are you telling me I have to wear this?" Hans explained, "This is the first formal meeting since you broke off the engagement. I cannot let you dress so casually." As he rattled on, Roman could only stay silent. Hans's expression soured. "But I'm sure you won't. I disregard this masterpiece, right? I put all my effort into it." It seemed he had hit the nail on the head. Roman sighed in defeat. "Fine, I'll wear it." That made Hans brighten up. "I knew you'd say that." Elsewhere, Chris seemed annoyed. With a stern face, he asked, "Why is he so late? At this rate, the young master will arrive before us." From a distance, Kevin shouted, "I'm sorry." He rushed to explain, "I'm still not used to wearing armor." Chris shook his head, helpless with Kevin. "How did you end up like this?" Kevin replied in confusion, "It's because there wasn't a single set of armor that fit me even in the forge." Chris broke into a cold sweat, thinking, even though the young master helped him, I still can't believe he almost lost to a guy like that. Kevin grumbled because of his helmet, seeing that Chris could only look on with dissatisfaction. He spoke sternly. Listen closely, as he lectured him. Both of us are the Lord's retainers, and we are the face of Dmitri. It is no exaggeration to say that his reputation will be decided by our actions. We are not allowed to be reckless. You must be very cautious with your words." Kevin quickly complied. "Understood, I will keep that in mind." He finished with a "Yes, sir, knight," which warmed Chris's heart a little. "Good, just ask me if you're unsure about anything." Kevin's eyes lit up. "Thank you, sir knight." Chris angrily reminded him, "Your helmet is crooked again." Hearing that, he shouted in surprise. The scene shifts to a castle where melodic music fills the air, blending with the chatter of the guests. One man sipped his wine and asked, "Is Roman really coming today?" He added smugly, "I can't believe he's actually attending. Bracco's party after he broke off a political marriage that he fought so hard to get, especially since he knows perfectly well that Bracco is targeting Lawrence." The girl standing next to him spoke up. "That's why everyone calls him an idiot. If he had a brain, he would have clung to one of the two families." He blamed Dimitri's shaky status entirely on Roman. The other man chimed in. "Even though Dmitri is the most powerful family in the Northeast, they are a bit greedy to still want to maintain a relationship with the Bracco family. But at least he's showing up to make up for his mistake." Nearby, someone was watching them. Sophia wondered, "What kind of person is Roman Dmitri?" The person next to her replied, "You'll know when you meet him. He leaves a terrible impression, and there's nothing much to look at either because he's so short." The guy laughed, and the way he's so full of himself just for being the eldest son of the Dmitri family. The person opposite them also mocked, "Even if I were a woman, I would find every way possible to break this engagement." Suddenly, the butler cleared his throat and interrupted the crowd, "The eldest son of the Dmitri family." The doors opened and Roman walked in. He stepped into the party with a face full of confidence. Everyone in the room turned their eyes toward him. They whispered, "Is that Roman Dmitri? He's so different from before. This is absolutely impossible. What's wrong with his hair?" Sophia watched him intently for a moment, then approached Roman. Sophia spoke up, "It is an honor to meet you." She bowed and introduced herself. "I am Sophia of the Grisol family." She said humbly, "You have probably never heard of our family. Even though we are not a prominent family, my father Baron Grisol is willing to give his life for the Cairo Empire." He smiled and replied, "I know the Grisol family very well," which took Sophia by surprise. "You really know the Grisol family?" Roman replied, "How could I not? I know a family that has existed for centuries." He recalled the butler's words, "This is the information on all the families in the Northeast that you requested." Back then, Hans had wondered, "But why did you suddenly want to see all of this?" Roman explained, "Since I will be attending the party as a representative of my family, I should at least equip myself with some basic etiquette. I must memorize the background of everyone I meet, as well as their legacy. To win others over, one must put in the corresponding effort." He thought to himself, "That is especially true for me, the so-called idiot of the Dmitri family." Outwardly, he said, "Isn't that the family that has been settled in the Northeast for quite some time? The timber from the Grisol family is famous for its high quality in the Cairo Empire. I heard you have succeeded on incensing Mana." Roman expressed his sincerity. "I truly congratulate you on that achievement, brother." The two chatted happily, leaving those other two guys bewildered. "What is this?" He quickly approached to strike up a conversation. "Greetings, Lord Roman Dmitri. I am Mana of the Von family." He smiled slightly. "I am being greeted by the eldest son of the Von family." Roman praised his family. "Hasn't Baron Von had illustrious military exploits in the recent war? I was very moved when I read about it." Mana blushed and replied, "I'm very touched that you think so." Two people behind them also wanted to get friendly. She approached to greet him. "It's been a while, Lord Roman. You have changed a lot." He flattered her. "Compared to me, Lady Eris is always beautiful." Roman got to the point. "How is your mother? I heard that lately she hasn't been well. Dmitri has received many benefits from our agreement with the hero's family about 10 years ago. I am also grateful that you showed goodwill toward us Both sides spoke with each other favorably. The young man said, "Lord Roman, I think I misjudged you. I always thought you were hard to talk to because you were always drunk." He seized the opportunity and said, "I was just about to have some wine, but it looks like I'll have to abstain from it." The party butler approached him. "Lord Roman." He relayed the message. "The young master invites you to the back room." Hearing that Roman's face darkened, he thought, "It seems the time has come for me to find out who is provoking me." The scene shifts to outside the palace. Chris observed the surroundings. Other families have many retainers who are knights. Kevin, standing by, wondered, "Sir Knight, what's a social banquet? Forget it. We'll never get the chance to go in there anyway, so just ignore them. Your helmet's crooked again. Someone noticed them. What's wrong with him?" The guy standing next to him introduced, "I heard he's the lackey for Roman Dimitri." They observed the two of them, Chris and they kept teasing Kevin, making him drop it and feel flustered. Then they started mocking them, truly hilarious, mocking them severely. "I heard that Roman Dimitri is the eldest son abandoned by the dragon, but I didn't expect him to bring along a guy who can't even hold a sword properly as his lackey." Creed calmly told Kevin to ignore them. "What do you expect from dogs barking? Dimitri's level is just that." At this moment, Kevin couldn't hold back anymore. The banquet at that time was taking place in a very aristocratic, lively atmosphere. Roman stood like a statue, in the middle of the crowd, walking back and forth at the party. His eyes stared blankly ahead. So the thing that had been catching his eye all this time was a beautiful girl with long golden hair. It was shining, and she was smiling as she talked. She looked truly beautiful when she smiled. It felt like that smile made the surrounding air shine even brighter. Anthony approached, threw his arm around his shoulder and asked, with hidden meaning, "Who are you staring at so intently, Roman?" He was startled, turned around and greeted his friend, "Oh, Anthony." While standing next to him, he whispered, "Do you know that blonde lady over there?" Anthony was a bit surprised. "What do you mean, you don't know who she is?" "She is Miss Flora." Yes, that blonde girl with the bright smile had made his youthful heart flutter. That lady was Flora. Roman felt like the name Flora Lawrence was carved into his heart. Inside his head, his face turned red, and his heart pounded with every beat. That was the Roman Dimitri of many years ago. But now the John Hayek inside Roman's body was quite different. The room door creaked open. Roman, with platinum hair and wearing royal aristocratic attire, had just stepped in when he heard his friend's voice. "Over here, Roman." Anthony was sitting on the chair. He didn't look like he had changed at all. As soon as he saw Roman, he excitedly called out, "What have you been doing all this time without me? Finally, I've met the person I needed to meet." Roman secretly felt happy. So this person was Anthony Bracco. He sat on the chair opposite, looking sneaky, and invited Roman to sit down. "I heard people say you've changed, but really, I didn't expect you to have changed this much. Sit down and tell me everything." Before sitting down, Roman observed his surroundings. There were still a few wine glasses and half-drunk fruit juice cups. He silently assessed that there were still traces left behind by someone. A wine bottle had rolled under the table leg, further strengthening his belief that someone had just been here. He thought the real reason why he chased them away before he arrived was that he had a secret, something he wanted to tell him. Roman smiled slightly, thinking, if that's the case, I should make him feel more comfortable. Then he answered gently, "I'm not sure either." He sat down on the chair, comfortably resting his arm on the backrest, chatting with Anthony. "I've spent a ton of money to change myself, and now I still change every day, even though I'm not doing anything." Saying that, Roman's handsome face slightly curled into a sly smile. "But I'm very happy to see you again, Anthony." He didn't respond. His turquoise eyes flashed with an unfamiliar, hard-to-read look. After that, he quickly regained his original cheeky appearance, nimbly pouring a glass of wine, not stopping his chatter. "I guess I can't think of that in a positive way. Honestly speaking, I don't know what you were thinking back then." Roman took the glass of wine and slightly echoed his words. "Back then, huh?" Anthony laughed slightly, recalling the unpleasant story. "Back when you, the one who was pushed into a situation where you had to choose between a political marriage with the Lawrence family and our friendship, were caught sleeping with my cousin in the storage room." Truly, he retold the story and added a semi-veiled vague judgment that made Roman quite uncomfortable. While Roman remained silent, Anthony continued the story, not hiding his disdain at all. Indeed, secrets are kept quite well at social banquets, but I still didn't expect you to go that far before your own wedding. Anthony smiled slightly and asked for Roman's opinion. So do you accept the invitation to this party as a confirmation that you've agreed to my proposal? I will keep this matter a secret. Not waiting for Roman's agreement, Anthony defaulted to just announcing the situation, then directly made the offer. So let's discuss the marriage between you and the Bracco family. Roman's purple eyes flashed with confusion. He tried to find memories related to the above events. In his head, he thought, marriage with the Bracco family. Suddenly time rewound like a movie appearing before his eyes. This memory was when the young Roman Dmitri was standing in front of Anthony's room. He stood there, for a long time, head bowed, looking at his shoes, questioning himself. Even though he had betrayed Anthony Bracco, Roman looked up at the door separating him and the truth he was about to face and beg. Father established a political marriage with the Lawrence family. Roman gathered all his courage, grabbed the doorknob, and encouraged himself. He couldn't avoid them forever. I will use this opportunity to mend the relationship between the two houses. As soon as Roman opened the door and stepped in, he saw Anthony sitting on a chair welcoming him. You're late, Roman. Come here quickly. And sit down. Sitting next to him was a younger girl. Anthony spoke quickly. Let me introduce you. This is Emily Bracco, my cousin. She greeted him. Very nice to meet you, Lord Roman. He was a bit surprised and stammered back. I am Roman. Anthony acted politely and suggested, let her drink with us too, it's fine, right? This is her first time here, so she can only walk around by herself. The girl sitting next to them held her hands tight, both nervous and shy. After hearing that, Roman comfortably agreed immediately. Of course she, but is a part of your family. Emily timidly poured wine into his glass. Anthony didn't mind at all and corrected his cousin. Emily, you have to pour wine for Roman too. Hearing that, he hurriedly interjected. It's fine, I can pour it for myself. Just hearing a word he didn't like, Anthony glared. You bastard! Are you showing off that you're about to get married? Roman's voice withered into silence in the face of Anthony's explosive rage regarding the matter. Anthony let out a cold, mocking laugh and quickly cut him off. Don't worry, from now on, the Bracco family won't touch the Lawrences anymore. Roman believed him instantly, his face brightening. His eyes lit up, his voice brimming with excitement. Really? Anthony smiled, speaking to him as if soothing a child. There's no need to force yourself. Just drink up and enjoy. Naive Roman, thinking all his troubles were resolved, happily accepted the wine from his hand, closed his eyes, and downed the glass in pure joy. Elated, his eyes squinted with delight, then dimmed. In the darkness, soft ambiguous moans echoed. Roman suddenly felt a splitting headache and pried his heavy eyelids open. Confused about where he was, Roman jolted awake. You couldn't even process your own thoughts, just a chaotic mess of shock and confusion. What the hell is going on? What is this? Roman was still dazed, unable to make sense of anything, when Anthony's scream from outside the door made him bolt upright. Roman glared at him with pure fury, like he was about to eat him alive. What did you do? Roman panicked, stammering nonsense. No, this... You looked at the girl lying motionless beside you, then tried to recall the last thing you remembered before blacking out, draining that glass of wine. You kept repeating the same sentence like a soul lost in the void. I can't remember. Aside from the dim, flickering candlelight, the room was pitch black. Anthony's voice echoed slowly. Listen carefully, Roman. He sat on the table. With his hands clasped, his tone turned dangerously threatening. Whatever affairs you're having are none of my business. But you touched a lady of the Bracco family. Roman Dmitri sat huddled on the opposite side of the table, hearing every word of the threat. I can't just let this slide. Facing the cowardly, trembling Roman, Anthony spoke with arrogance. I'll give you a choice. Option 1. I expose the whole truth and then you'll finally be free. He emphasized the second option, making Roman's face go pale with dread. Option 2. You must marry the scion of the Bracco family. Fight to restore the relationship between us. Anthony cunningly threatened. What you just did really infuriates me. But if you become a member of the Bracco house, I might just calm down and forgive you. Roman sat trembling before him, as if he were standing trial for his own sins. Anthony's voice continued to ring out. So which one do you choose? That was the past Roman had endured. In the present, Jong Hyuk, having just been reminded of those dark memories, gasped. Damn it, he thought. So that's what really happened. All the pieces have fallen into place. If the marriage fell apart because Roman had tarnished the Bracco heir, then the honor of the Dmitri family would hit rock bottom. The two of them had already faced enough public criticism. Roman didn't even have the confidence to face his own father's wrath, but he couldn't choose the other option either, because he truly loved Flora. He didn't want to abandon the marriage he had forced into existence, nor did he want to smear Flora's reputation in this situation. Roman looked at the wine glass in his hand, lost in thought. So that was the reason he self-destructed while making his choice. He wanted his own death to resolve everything. Thinking this, he tipped his head back to take a drink, muttering to himself, a weakling who could never finish anything in his life. That was Roman Dmitri. Deep inside, Roman felt a pang of pity. How truly pathetic and miserable. Seeing Roman lost in thought, Anthony pressed him. Why the hesitation, huh, Roman? The bond between our two houses could turn the entire Northeast upside down. He grew more and more fervent, rambling on about his ambitions. No one could stand against us. You could leverage the power of the Bracco house in the Northeast too. There's no reason for you to. Just as he was reaching his climax, Roman cut him off with a sharp, provocative jab. Is that really all there is to it? Taken by surprise, Anthony stumbled over his words, managing only a breathless, huh. Roman set his empty glass down on the table with a thud and asked again, You want me to agree to a political marriage for a reason as pathetic as that? Anthony shot up, fuming. You've got it all wrong. This isn't a choice. If you refuse, I'll broadcast everything that happened in the warehouse to the whole world. Think about it. What do you think will happen to the Dmitri family's reputation? Think very carefully if you still want to hold your head up high. The moment he finished, Roman slammed his foot right onto the table with a crash. Anthony went dead silent, stunned by this sudden change. This wasn't the timid kid he used to be, the one he could easily threaten before. Roman crossed his legs and said arrogantly, How many times do I have to say it for you to get it? The Dmitri house doesn't need to accept a proposal from the Bracco house for such a miserable reason. Meanwhile, the party outside was still in full swing with people chatting and laughing boisterously. Lady Sophia, who had been enjoying herself, suddenly glanced over and spotted him. Roman was strolling out when he bumped into her. She excitedly called out, Lord Roman, where have you been? He replied gently, I had to take care of a few things. It looks like I'll have to head out early because of them. Sophia looked a bit disappointed. Really, is that so? The party has only just begun. It would be better if you stayed a little longer. Roman smiled and politely declined. I'm sorry, but this is an urgent matter. The people around them, hearing this, chimed in with polite, flowery remarks. Lord Roman, is it really true? That's such a pity. I still had so much to talk to you about. Me too. Let's talk again when there's another chance. Okay? Roman quickly said his goodbyes and stepped outside. No sooner had he left the party than he heard someone shouting, Take back what you just said, you bastard. He paused, his attention caught by the commotion. The noise was coming from where a group of knights had gathered. Following the young ladies and gentlemen of various noble houses, the sound of a clash erupted, making him jump as he looked toward the source. The sudden impact sent a knight's helmet flying, followed by a loud scream calling for Kevin. The collision knocked a red-haired boy to the ground. A mocking voice immediately cut in. What were you expecting, Kevin? That's all the Dmitri rank amounts to, isn't it? Kevin turned back with a look of annoyance, while Creed urged him to let it go. The two knights from House Bracco exchanged a knowing, scornful glance. They took turns jeering. What was he thinking, leaving a kid like this to be his own bodyguard? Look at that helmet. It doesn't even fit his head. They crowded around Kevin, laughing. Looks like the brat just picked up any random helmet that happened to fit. That's pretty sloppy, don't you think? Grit, standing nearby, couldn't hold back his frustration. Are the knights of House Bracco trained to fight with their mouths instead of their swords? The knight replied arrogantly. Who knows? He pressed his hand down on Kevin's head as he spoke. I'm pretty confident that even without training, my swordsmanship is still better than this kid's. Kevin bit his lip hard, listening to the mockery. This is exactly why everyone calls you Dimitri idiots. After hearing that, Kevin bowed his head, his voice cold and commanding. Take that back. Young Master Roman hasn't done anything to deserve being called that. He clenched his fists and shouted a warning. So, take back what you just said, you jerk. Furious, the knight slapped him hard across the face. How dare you? As his helmet flew off, Chris shouted in alarm, turning to draw his sword. But he froze, deeply unsettled. The man was a Bracco knight, and the Dimitri and Bracco families were currently in a conflict of interest. Worry was etched all over his face. If he caused a scene here, it wouldn't just bring trouble to the young master. It would drag the entire Dimitri family into the mess. Kevin slowly sat up and lifted his face. I am young Master Roman's knight. His face was flushed red from the slap, but he gritted his teeth as he spoke. I don't want to fight a bunch of thugs and fake knights like you. The man clicked his tongue and sneered, his hand raised to strike Kevin again with aggression. Fine, let's see how long you can keep up that pride. A hand appeared and clamped firmly onto the knight's wrist. The man's eyes widened as he looked at Kevin in shock. Grit was equally stunned. Roman was holding the knight's hand. Kevin gasped. Young master. Roman glared at the man with a look of pure annoyance. Before the knight could finish his sentence, Roman slapped him right across the face. The strike stunned the man, who reached up to touch his face in a daze. What? Did I just get slapped? I didn't even have time to react. He shouted, but before he could finish, another slap landed. You absolute moron. The man still couldn't believe it, standing there firmly trying to say something. Before he could, Roman slapped him again. This time he could only stammer as Roman landed a direct blow to his head. His face burned with pain and he stood there dazed, on the verge of tears. Roman commanded, his gaze icy as he looked up. Anthony sat in his room, his face deathly pale. Damn it! What the hell just happened? Roman remembered the conversation he had with him. I'm talking to you about taking responsibility for laying your hands on our family's young lady. Proposing a marriage to the Bracco family isn't much better than having to mortgage your assets, is it? This is the final consideration I can offer you. If you don't accept this, you've already made a mistake that can never be undone. Roman had just smirked. Do whatever you like. I'm already called a fool anyway. So if I add another rumor or two about my wickedness or deceit, it won't change a thing. Besides, perhaps you're the one who needs to learn how to behave properly. He couldn't believe his ears. What did you say? Roman said sternly. I chose to break off the engagement because I wanted to, not because of your threats. One way or another. You've already achieved your own goal ever since House Dimitri turned its back on the Lawrence family. But now you're baring your fangs at me. How exactly do you expect me to react to that? Roman added with a cold expression. Should I help the Lawrence family cause trouble for the Bracco family? The man's face went pale as Roman emphasized. Just to satisfy my hatred for you. Roman had calculated everything in advance. He had studied the Bracco family, their ties with the central government, and the influence that came with them. That was undeniable. However, their power came solely from those connections. If you only look at wealth and influence the family with the true power in the Northeast, what is the Dimitri family, not the Bracco family? Roman stared at him coldly. The man trembled as he heard every word. So what are you going to do now? He bowed his head, not daring to look up. If this is resolved, you won't interfere in matters related to the Lawrence family anymore, right? Roman replied. Exactly. He stammered. Then, let's just end it here. Recalling that conversation, he still couldn't believe it. Roman had changed. He was shaking with fear. It wasn't just his expression, his actions, his gaze, and his tone all made the person in front of him feel fear. He was no longer the fool he once knew. He had completely turned into someone else. What on earth happened to him? While he was lost in thought, someone called out, "Young master." He snapped back, shouting, "Don't bother me right now." The person outside hesitated, then reported something that made him jump in shock. But Sir Roman and his knight are—" Outside the hall, everyone was in an uproar. The knight was kneeling before Roman. "Renzi, Vanson, please, I beg you, forgive me. I'll never do it again. Please, my lord." Kevin stepped in to intercede. "Young master, I think you've punished him enough." Creed followed up. "He's right, sir. Please consider our relationship with the Bracco family and just end this here." Roman's expression didn't change. "I'm the one who decides whether he's been punished enough. If he dies, that's just the price he has to pay. He has to pay for his own words and actions." Anthony shouted, his voice ringing out, asking what Roman meant by that, and criticizing him despite him being the youngest son of the Dimitri family. "Even so, I won't forgive behavior like this if you don't apologize for your recent rudeness." Roman glanced at him, cutting him off, asking why he should apologize, then looked at the knight. His face was already swollen. "This guy slandered me and touched someone from the Dimitri household." Roman turned to Anthony Bracco and asked, "Do you really think I'm the one in the wrong here?" He started complaining again, saying that even so, you've gone too far. Roman didn't hesitate to reply, "Too far. Didn't I tell you? My personal grudge could destroy the relationship between us as well as between our two families." He added, causing the other man to turn pale. "So from today on, you'd better watch your behavior." And Roman leaned in close to his face, threatening, "I'm not a patient man. Not even a little bit. Now decide for yourself what you're going to do." Roman's earlier words echoed in his head. Should I help the Lawrence house cause trouble for the Bracco family? In his heart, he hated him beyond words. But on the outside, he still bowed his head, admitting, thinking about it, "You did the right thing." Roman laughed triumphantly, hearing him continue. "I will make sure he receives a proper punishment." He turned around with a friendly smile. "We really are good friends, aren't we?" Roman walked up to the knight, and now he raised his hand, ordering with a cold gaze, clenching his teeth. "Do it!" A deafening slap rang out, knocking the man unconscious, and everyone came to carry him away. But everyone had to admit that the old Roman was a fool, not worthy of respect, even if he was a member of the Dimitri family, the most powerful clan in the Northeast. Roman turned and walked away, calling out, "Creed, Kevin, let's go." Everyone looked at him in shock, but they had no other choice now but to accept the truth that the fool they once knew no longer existed. After they left, the sun began to set. On the carriage, Kevin and Creed sat next to each other, both looking uneasy, and Kevin bowed his head and spoke first. "I'm truly sorry. It was all my fault that you were insulted by them." Likewise, Creed admitted his fault. "I'm also to blame. The honor of the Dimitri family was trampled on, and Kevin was beaten, yet I couldn't do a thing." Roman sat opposite them, listening to the two. They apologized, but he said nothing. Then he spoke up, having to swallow your pride. Like that must have been difficult, right? "Thank you for holding on until I arrived." Creed and Kevin were surprised and looked up. He continued, "This kind of hot-headedness only brings trouble. So your decision helped them avoid the worst-case scenario." However, he paused for a moment, his face cold. "This isn't the answer I wanted. Because in this entire Cairo region, no one has the right to touch anyone from the Dimitri family. Even if you have to endure it, you must remember the face of the person responsible. You must never forget it. Your own anger," he pointed out sharply. "I can't stand being looked down upon by others. If you want to follow someone who lives above all others like me, you must adapt to this way of behaving." Kevin and Creed were surprised by those words, but it seemed they understood what they had to do. The carriage kept moving, taking them back. Early morning at the mansion. "This is all the information about the Bracco family that you requested from the Black Moon Intelligence Agency, sir." Mr. Hans presented the report, saying that according to the Black Moon Agency, the recent actions of the Bracco family were very unusual. He flipped through the documents while thinking Bracco, a family that had settled in the Northeast for over a century. After a few members of the Bracco family started working for the central government, their family began to rise as a prominent clan in the region. Roman finished reading and agreed, "Just like I thought. Their military power is not very large." The butler also expressed honestly, "I was quite surprised. I thought their military power was as strong as their social status." Roman affirmed that proves the power they hold comes mainly from the central government. There are 2 empires and 6 kingdoms on the Salamander continent. Among them, the Kingdom of Cairo is the smallest and weakest country. The border of Cairo runs along the northeast mountain range and is connected to all other kingdoms, so this country has experienced many invasions, always being a tasty morsel, eyed by powerful enemies. The Kingdom of Cairo has no choice but to align its military with the central government to survive. The central government, because of that, has also gained more power. They also hold supreme power on the continent. If a noble family refuses their duty, they will immediately be considered as rebels and arrested by soldiers. Immediately after the rebels are subdued, their land will be confiscated and become state property. A part of their land will be given to the lord of the neighboring region as a reward for helping to suppress the rebellion. The rest will be given to new nobles who are willing to submit to the central government. This system of influence has given the Bracco family invisible power when aligning with the government. Hans was surprised when he explained it like that. I didn't expect it to go to this extent. He continued, it is also thanks to the government that the Bracco family can borrow such large sums of money from the Golden Bank. He looked at the information sheet about the Bracco family. If the Bracco family borrows this amount of money on credit without any collateral, then perhaps that money has been invested in the Beggar Mercenary Group. The Beggar Mercenary Group is a collection of hundreds of A-rank mercenaries from all over, with the core being the beggars. This group mainly earns money from combat participation fees during colonial wars. Mr. Hans immediately mentioned, looking at the number of soldiers that the Bracco family is mobilizing recently. It's likely they intend to attack Lawrence within half a month. Roman was quite surprised, so the Bracco family has already finished all their preparations. The Braccos are mobilizing. They're likely planning to attack Lawrence within the next 2 weeks, sir. Roman was quite surprised. So the Bracco house has already finished all their preparations, have they? Butler Hans hesitated as he asked. It seems the Lawrence family won't be able to win the battle, will they? Roman replied with certainty. Even if they fortify their defenses at most, it will only last for 1 month. Roman mused to himself that he had told Anthony he would no longer intervene in matters concerning the Lawrence family. But if he wants Roman Dmitri to continue living, then he must eliminate the threat to himself, which is the Bracco family. No matter how powerful an army the Bracco family possesses, they will never stand a chance against the Dmitri family. He said this with a glint in his eyes. If I borrow the power of the Dmitri family, crushing the Bracco family would be a small matter. But even if I did that, it would be useless. Indeed, Dmitri is one of the first great families in Cairo, but they are not considered a threat in the eyes of other families in the northeast. What needs to be done now is to seize this opportunity to restore the family's status. He sighed and stood up. I need to see father immediately. It's time to pay the price for that previous promise. Meanwhile, in a bustling marketplace elsewhere, everyone was startled and terrified as they looked in one direction. A figure approached a man wearing blood-stained iron armor. That guy slowly took off his helmet. It was Lucas, a mercenary. Before he even started talking, he began bad-mouthing the Dmitri family. They really haven't changed at all. In front of a blacksmith shop, he took off his current armor and placed it on the table. Someone said, "Look at you." It was Hendrik, a blacksmith for the Dmitri family. He asked Lucas warmly, "Was the recent battle that tough?" Lucas sighed in frustration. "Don't remind me. I was almost killed by those reckless idiots with brains the size of grapes." The old man didn't ask further, but inspected the sword in his hand. "The quality of this spear is too poor. Where did you buy it?" Lucas lamented. "At the first shop I saw. It's because of that place I almost met my maker." Hendrik got annoyed hearing that. When buying ironware and weapons, you have to go to the Dmitri family store. Who would be stupid enough to pass up the absolute best manufacturer? Lucas didn't argue back and stood up. "That's why I'm here. I'm leaving it all to you, Hendrik." Hendrik replied enthusiastically. "I'll make you a whole new set of gear. It'll take a little while, though." Once Lucas entrusted the work to Hendrik, he headed for the door. "That's fine. I think I'll head back to the Dmitri residence to rest while I wait." His expression was contemplative. "The battlefield has made me so exhausted." On his way back, he saw a crowd gathered. Curious, he thought. What's going on there that so many people are gathered? Lucas wondered to himself, is there another battle happening? I don't intend to take on any more work, though. But because of that, he squeezed into the crowd. I can't help it. I'm just too curious. It turned out they were gathered to read a recruitment notice. He read it and saw a notice for hiring soldiers. The prerequisites were, but must be healthy and have the ambition to become stronger. The number of recruits is 30 and the salary is 3 silver coins per month. Lucas looked at the notice and thought, on average, a family only needs 5 gold coins to live per month. So if you consider all the risks, this job isn't that bad. But if only this condition wasn't here. At the bottom of the notice, it stated a special condition. You will work only for Roman Dimitri, not the Dimitri family. Keep this in mind and only apply when you are ready to entrust your life completely to Roman. A man standing next to him advised Lucas, don't even think about applying. You won't beat those hundreds of people. He turned around. Definitely not. It looks that way, but I'm a B-rank mercenary. At the very least, I need to make 50 silver coins a month to pledge my loyalty to a noble. Suddenly, Lucas realized something. Wait a minute. He turned around and asked, you said there are hundreds of people applying. The man nodded. That's right. Lucas was quite surprised. Is this job really worth that much? He said clearly, even if the conditions are good, it's not for the Dimitri family, is it? It's for that fool of the Dimitri house, Roman Dimitri. Who knows what kind of trials you have to go through when you become a soldier under him? After Lucas finished speaking, everyone there turned to look at him. The atmosphere gradually fell silent. Seeing them like that, he was confused. The man hearing that knew for sure that he knew nothing about what was going on here. He slowly explained, you're an outsider, so you don't know. Lord Roman is no longer the fool he used to be. Not only did he eliminate the Bloodfang gang, but he also treats everyone very well. Lucas heard this with a surprised expression. That person understood why he reacted that way. At first, we didn't believe it either. But after hearing what Clark said, I started to reconsider. Hearing a strange name, he asked, who is Clark? The man introduced him. After Clark's son became a subordinate of Lord Roman, his family's poor life has become much better. The man tried to remember. Let's see, what was his son's name? I think it was Kevin. Looking back to some time ago at the Dimitri residence, Kevin was puzzled. What a vacation? He asked, confused. Roman replied, from tomorrow I'm giving you a 3-day leave. Resting is also a way to train, he said, and began to walk away. You've worked hard. So rest easy and spend time with your family. Kevin, still dazed, replied, yes, young master. He returned to his room to prepare his things, yet he couldn't stop being confused. A vacation. He had changed his clothes, but he still couldn't escape the thought, am I not used to this back then? If I didn't work, I'd be dead. Since I came to the castle, I haven't been able to see my family either. I wonder what they're doing now. As he stepped out the door, still lost in thought, he heard butler Hans call out, Kevin! You startle, responding to Mr. Hans, who cheerfully and excitedly hands you some clothes, saying, you've been gone for so long. You're not planning on going home looking like that, are you? Master Roman has prepared some clean clothes for you to wear, so go ahead and change into them. Before you can even react, your hands take the clothes the butler offers, and as if that weren't enough, he places a small pouch of coins on top, adding, you'll need money to buy gifts for your family, right? From now on, you'll receive 30 silver coins every month, Mr. Hans says, chatting away happily. Just enjoy yourself. It's perfectly fine to spend a little on gifts or splurge. Hearing the butler, Kevin takes the items with a dazed look, then quickly changes into the fresh new clothes, his face lighting up as he buys a bag of bread, and heads home in high spirits. Dressed in the new clothes, he is amazed, unable to believe that fabric could feel this soft. He thinks to himself that just wearing them is enough to make him feel happy. He praises the loaves of bread in his hands, having bought plenty for his family as well. The bread is hot and smells so good that Kevin walks down the street feeling so joyful that passersby can't help but, seeing the flowers around him, he thinks, Mary will surely be thrilled. She once said her lifelong dream was to eat bread with the filling of a freshly baked loaf. Speaking of which, he thinks back to the past. Every single day, Mary always had to complain about the family having to eat stale bread, and he reflects on how he himself could never afford to buy a fresh hot loaf for her. A fresh loaf costs twice as much as stale bread, especially with those debt collectors constantly showing up at their door with knives and swords. Thinking of this, he clenches his fists. No matter what, he is determined to become stronger under the young master's guidance. Arriving home, Kevin is even more stunned than when Roman announced his leave. The scene before his eyes is his mom and dad are relaxing, drinking tea and chatting, while his little sister is happily admiring the flower garden. He is shocked. What is going on? Kevin looks at the scene so peaceful and wonders, how strange. It feels as if he were asked to go to the outskirts of a castle instead of the slums. While he's confused, Mary notices him and shouts, "Big brother!" Kevin's parents hear this and turn around, looking surprised as well. His mother rushes over and hugs him tight, crying, "Oh my goodness, how long has it been?" Mary cheers. "It's really Big Brother. It's really him." His father. Mr. Clark also runs over to ask, "Are you okay, son?" Kevin hugs his mother and asks, "Mom, Dad?" "This house." His father finally explains, "Mr. Hans came and gave us this house to live in. He even gave us a plot of land for farming. They said it was under the direct orders of young Master Roman," his mother adds. "And that's not all. Everyone at the castle has helped us so much too. Now we finally feel like we're really living." In this slum, his eyes light up and he finally understands everything. "I see, Master Roman." Kevin is so moved that his eyes well up with tears as he exclaims, "Thank you so much, my lord." His father suddenly notices something and asks immediately, "Son, what about your cheek?" His mother hears this and lets go of her son to check. Clark questions him directly. "Did Master Roman hit you?" Kevin, flustered, immediately denies it. "What? No? That's not it? Not at all." His mother places her hands on his shoulders. "You can tell us the truth. If they treated you like that, we are—" Kevin immediately pushes his mother's hands away. "Master Roman is absolutely not that kind of person." His mother, confused, asks, "Then what happened to your face?" He slowly tells them, "Mom, Dad, the truth is." After his story, skeptical voices rise. "Are you seriously expecting us to believe this?" The men sit together discussing it. Clark, Kevin's father, tries to persuade his friends. "Come on, what other explanation is there? How else would you explain this house and the new plot of land?" His friend, slightly convinced, says, "That's true." Clark continues to persuade him. "Don't listen to those rumors. According to Kevin, the master even slapped that jerk of a knight. From the Bracco house just to protect his own knight. What noble would ever go that far to protect their subordinate?" The man is stunned. Gradually, people begin to spread rumors about Roman. "I can't believe that stupid young master actually did that." They pass the word from one person to another. "You've seen the current life of Clark and his family, haven't you? I heard Master Roman gave them all those things. It's because their son Kevin became his subordinate. I also heard he gave them a house. He gave them land and he even slapped a knight from the Bracco house, all for Kevin's sake." Clark's close friends hear it from his own mouth. "Just yesterday, I felt so sorry for that kid every time I saw him. But I did see the master causing a scene. Over something at a shop. Are you sure you didn't miss it? The children don't stop talking either. I heard Master Roman treats his people very well. I want to be like Kevin too. I just need to earn Master Roman's trust. Like Clark's family." Those rumors spread wider and Roman's reputation improves significantly. Roman Dmitri is very kind and treats his people well. If you can earn his trust, you can live a completely different life. The scene shifts back to everyone crowding around a notice board. "Recruitment," the man explains for a while. "That's why so many people are applying to become his soldiers." Lucas, hearing this, is stunned. "What on earth is happening? They wiped out the blood nest already. And what about the incident at the social gathering? Did Roman really do all of that?" He recalled the scene from back then. "The Roman Dmitri I knew would never do things like that. 2 years ago, I even saw him throwing a tantrum in the casino because he'd lost all his money." He muttered to himself, "It's only been 2 years. What on earth happened to this world?" The man beside him didn't understand what he was saying. He chuckled, intrigued. "Things are getting interesting. I want to see this for myself." At that moment, it was already dark. Jonathan reported, "The testing phase is proceeding quite smoothly. We only need to provide a minimal number of soldiers for the entry process. Lord Roman will handle the rest of the entire operation." Romeo asked, "Haven't we spent too much time on this already?" Jonathan advised, "This is your last chance to reclaim everything, sir." "Are you sure about this, sir?" Jonathan still urged. "Forming an army for a single individual is too dangerous. At the very least, you should ask Lord Roman about his intentions first." Suddenly, Romeo interrupted Jonathan. He recounted, "When I heard Roman was going to attend the Bracco family's social gathering, I thought he was preparing to form an alliance with the Bracco family to drive out our second-generation kin, but Roman stood up in front of all those nobles. The Bracco family's knight even defied Anthony's attempts to stop him, even though Anthony could have joined forces with our second-generation army to apply pressure and deliver a fatal blow. Then he could have secured the succession and achieved his goal of revenge." Romeo swirled his glass, but Roman, who has been branded as a fool for over a decade, has finally started living his own life after the Blood Shadow incident. Romeo's voice was full of pride. "As a father, I am genuinely happy for him." Jonathan understood Romeo's words. He then asked about the soldier recruitment. "So how many people have applied?" 5,100. "Given his reputation, I'd be happy if even 50 people showed up." Jonathan calculated. "The estimate is already over 500 people." "What?" Romeo was shocked when he heard that number. Scene changed to the city gates. Everyone gathered to participate in the recruitment. Creed entered the tent, called for Roman, and reported, "The testing process is complete, sir." Roman was lost in thought, waiting for something. Another day passed before the selection. Under the full moon, whispers began to echo from the building. Inside a pub, Lucas took a sip of beer and smiled contentedly. Dimitri's dark beer is truly number one. With his cheeks slightly flushed, Lucas suddenly thought, "I still can't believe so many people gathered before the selection. There are more applicants than I expected." The people inside the building kept talking. Not just that Lucas looked at the group of 3 men sitting right in front of him. Seeing the identity tags on their belts, the 3 of them were laughing and talking loudly. He fixed his gaze on the tag hanging from the belt of the man on the left. I bet he continued to speculate, at that table in the corner. They are definitely C-rank mercenaries. Then he looked towards 3 others at the bar counter. Those 3 at the bar don't look like mercenaries, but they probably have combat experience too. Finally, Lucas concluded, "Besides here, there are very few inns in Dimitri. In a place where there are 5 to 6 people per square meter like right now, the number of applicants is really higher than I expected." He wondered, but why though if they have enough real combat experience? They should be doing other better jobs, right? It surely can't just be out of curiosity like me. Not wanting to think any further, Lucas slammed his glass onto the table. "I give up. I can't understand it." Just as he was about to leave, he suddenly heard a young man asking someone else, "Henderson, is that you? Why are you here? Don't tell me you said you were going to join the Lawrence family's forces." Lucas overheard this and it caught his attention. He watched the 2 of them talk. Henderson replied, "At first that was true. After all, Lawrence is my home." As he said this, his eyes grew sad. "But after seeing Lord Roman Dimitri destroy the Blood Shadow in Lawrence, I reconsidered. Those who weren't there wouldn't believe it." Returning to the memory of that day, he stood in the crowd, utterly shocked by the scene in front of him. "But on that day, I saw him at the square, Roman Dimitri covered in blood." The sight of Roman pulling an old man's hair. Henderson continued, "Grabbing the hair and dragging the leader of the Blood Shadow. Can you imagine it?" Both asking and answering himself. A young master of a noble family, punishing the Blood Shadow for laying hands on his people. The sight of the man kicking, something blood-splattering, traveling to another territory to smash the leader's skull. Henderson suddenly stared ahead, expressing fear. "I can't get that image out of my head." Suddenly, the 3 people suspected to be C-rank mercenaries all turned to look at him. He continued, "People keep doubting and denying the incident in Lawrence." The 3 men, believed to have ability against demons, were also listening to him there. "But I am the one who saw it with my own eyes and felt it. Roman Dimitri is not some weakling like in the rumors." Henderson slammed his hand on the table and shouted, "He is truly a great leader who can fight for his own people." 2 other guys at another table smiled in agreement with his words. "And this recruitment is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to become a subordinate of his. I will pass the selection, receive residency in Dimitri, and live as a subordinate of Lord Roman Dimitri." Lucas silently repeated the name in his head, Roman Dimitri. Yours, sir. I will pass the selection round, gain residency in Dimitri, and live as your subordinate. Lucas silently repeated the name in his head. Roman Dimitri. Someone worth entrusting my life to. He understood, then scanned the building's exterior. He thought, this massive commotion surely isn't a coincidence. Early in the morning, outside the tower, the recruitment for Dimitri's training camp began. Lucas followed the stream of people into the tower. They were chattering about holding a celebration. After the selection, he fell into deep thought. If everything I've heard is true, then what choice should I make? Casting his eyes toward the crowd again, Lucas pondered. Everyone here has the same thought as me, those full of doubt applying after hearing all the rumors. The moment of truth was approaching. When they finally saw the real Roman, his gaze suddenly dropped, questioning. What the? Everyone went silent. Lucas shifted his stance. Everyone simultaneously bowed to someone approaching. The one walking toward them was none other than young master of the Dimitri fief, Roman Dimitri. The crowd continued to bow respectfully and parted in two for Roman and his men to pass. Lucas thought to himself, even without being asked, everyone here is instinctively bowing to let him through. The realization solidified in Lucas's mind. Those rumors, they're real. Before Roman's imposing back, he gradually stepped onto the stairs under everyone's gaze. The air pressure around them dropped. Roman told them, raise your heads. He stood before them, his voice booming like the information on the notice. Today I will choose 30 warriors to fight for me. But before we start, I have a few things to say to everyone. Roman shouted, beginning to express his own ideals. I, Roman Dimitri, have no intention of hiding away in some remote territory. He swept his gaze over the astonished faces below. I will fight constantly to reach a higher status than I have now, and in that process, your lives will inevitably be in danger. So those who don't feel certain about following me can turn back right now. Roman continued, saying that what they should think about when getting your head sliced off on the battlefield should not be resentment toward the one who brought you there, which is me. It should be regret for not being able to stand by and witness your leader. The back of a powerful, authoritative ruler emerged in his words, standing high like a monument of the greatest power on the continent. The crowd looked blank while Lucas felt a bit of panic and confusion blooming in his mind. What is he talking about? Forget the greatest power on the continent part. Isn't his position in the family being threatened? He should be acting less arrogant, right? However, when seeing Roman's truly serious and reliable expression, he felt, for some reason, perhaps he really could pull it off. The vice captain of the Dimitri Knight Order spoke up. All right, now I will guide you through the first round of selection. Chris looked toward the man holding the crossbow and arrows. The test is simple. Participants will stand in the designated spots. This archer will fire 3 shots at you. The arrows might just graze you, or they might hit the target behind you. Or they could pierce your body, causing an unexpected death. Grit's eyes glinted coldly, declaring that only those who do not flinch when the 3 arrows are fired will pass the first round. Their faces were full of anxiety and emptiness upon hearing Creed, the vice captain of House Dimitri. His voice echoed to the top of the building. The selection will proceed in the order names are called. Duck, move to the designated spot. Next is Morrison, stand next to Duck. The archer began preparing his bow and arrows. Morrison, standing next to him, was a bit terrified, thinking, he said it all. Yeah, but are they really going to aim at the people standing there? Logically speaking, who in this world uses death to recruit soldiers for themselves? The moment the arrow was notched, he thought, this archer must be highly skilled. Seeing a drop of sweat roll down the archer's cheek, he kept reminding himself, he will never make a mistake. Following the sound of the wind, the hand released and the arrow flew. It struck the target just a few centimeters from the person's neck. Seeing Duck look panicked, Morrison encouraged himself. All right, this is a psychological war. The archer continued to raise the second arrow. This time he thought that he just needed to stand still and trust that everything would be fine. Just as he was certain the arrow would miss, the exact opposite happened. It pierced the guy's right leg. Morrison was stunned. The others, except for the calm Lucas, were the same. The guy stiffened in pain, let out a sharp cry of agony, clutched his bleeding leg, and collapsed. Chris ran over shouting for medical aid. He told the soldiers to bring something to carry him away. "Hurry!" The men immediately obeyed. While being carried away on the stretcher, the guy kept groaning in pain. The remaining crowd was confused and fearful. Was that bit about preparing to be shot by an arrow that he mentioned earlier actually true? Unbelievable! Creed coldly called the next name. Hearing his name, he was terrified. Morrison stared at the blood still staining the wooden target. The arrow had pierced the guy's thigh. If it had hit his head, he would have died instantly. Morrison frantically blurted out his thoughts. "Damn it, damn it, damn it! This is too insane. I only signed up for a chance to become a knight." "Chris coldly," he explained. "This is exactly what the young master said." At the same time, he said, "I will say it again for those choosing to give up." He looked at Morrison, who was crying and hanging his head. "If you are afraid of being hit by the archer's arrows, then quit right now." With a serious gaze, Roman remained the same. Chris reminded them, "If you can endure until the end, even if you are hit by an arrow, you will have the honor of receiving your badge." Having confirmed the successful passing of the first round, Chris tightened his tone, addressing the cowards still lingering in the training grounds. "Get the hell out of here right now!" Flashback to one day before the selection. Roman had gathered the 4 candidates, standing them in a straight line, and spoke. "Let me explain your roles one more time." They listened with serious expressions. "In tomorrow's first selection, you will be shot by an arrow. The archer is a veteran marksman from this region. He will only aim for non-vital areas." The young archer tapped his chest with a confident smile. "I won't miss, so please don't worry about a thing." Looking toward Chris, who was bringing over some fruit, Roman announced, "This is your reward." He opened a chest filled with piles of gold coins, and as the sparkling light caught their eyes, everyone let out a joyful cheer. Roman, his face expressionless, continued with his offer and posed a question. "You won't be in much pain as there will be physicians on standby, but you will still be struck by an arrow. Do you still wish to go through with this?" The 4 shouted in unison, "Yes!" Their voices echoed through the room. Roman told them that if there was nothing else, they could go. They obeyed, and silence returned to the room. Britt asked skeptically, "My lord, why must you go to such lengths?" At that moment, Roman was sitting at his desk, preparing to deal with some paperwork, and replied, "I cannot yet find the right people if I just rely on empty threats. I must show them that they are wagering their own lives, even though the chance of being hit by that arrow is only 1 in 100. Most applicants will be crushed by the fear of that 1% chance." Hearing this, Creed continued with his inquiry. "Then what conditions must they meet to become your subordinates?" Roman replied, "I want someone with a rock-solid psyche. In other words, someone born with the heart of a beast." Creed repeated, "The heart of a beast." Roman explained the reason exactly. Those born with the heart of a beast will grow strong quickly, even if they start from 0. Only those with that innate quality can walk by my side. Back to the present, during the warrior selection, someone screamed, "What kind of crazy selection is this?" This was followed by a crowd discussing the situation and deciding to leave. Down at the city gate, someone shouted, "Are you going to take responsibility if I end up dead? He's not even a noble holding a court position. I don't want to risk my life for Roman Dmitri. I'm quitting. Me too." Creed observed the situation and kept count. About 100 people had quit. He looked toward Roman. At this moment, Roman was thinking about that heart of a beast. It was an innate talent. He recalled Kevin's expression back then, like Kevin, who did not hesitate to swing his sword and cut his own wrist on command. Then his memory shifted to the vice captain of the Dmitri Knight Order, or Creed, who had asked how to become stronger from the very man who had humiliated him. He concluded, those types of people could be said to be born with the heart of a beast. Those without the heart of a beast, no matter how strong they are, cannot surpass those who were different from birth. Roman calculated that he had to filter out those kinds of people through this selection process. He spoke loudly with firm determination. "Continue." A vast blue sky with white clouds covered the training grounds. One man was panting heavily from exhaustion. Lucas watched him and thought, that guy was at the inn, so he didn't give up. He saw Henderson, who was currently trembling. Ow, as he leaned against the wooden target. He guessed that the man had been telling the truth earlier, even though he was shaking like a leaf. Henderson cried, biting his lip, thinking, "This is my chance to pledge my loyalty to Lord Roman." He stared straight ahead at the archer who was drawing his bow. "I can't quit without having done anything yet." An arrow whizzed past, striking the target just centimeters from his temple. He let out a sharp gasp. Feeling the dark atmosphere surrounding that archer, Henderson asked himself, "No. Should I just give up? If I die, it will all be for nothing." The arrow flew rapidly toward his shoulder. The thought crossing his mind now was, "I still have time." The archer pursed his lips and released the string. Henderson's whole body shook. The arrow landed right between his legs just a little closer, and he would have lost his lineage. Grit announced that Henderson had passed. He collapsed to his knees as if he still hadn't escaped the paralyzing fear. Lucas laughed. Just one more second and he would have quit. He got lucky. And so the selection continued smoothly. Aside from those who quit, there were about 400 applicants. The number of people who passed the first round was 120. Along with them were the radiant faces of those who remained. Roman thought to himself, "I have selected those who can prove useful through this first round of screening." He looked at a group, including Henderson, and judged, "There are those who passed while trembling." He then turned to look at Lucas and others who had passed without any fear at all. Roman summarized, "Both groups aren't much different from my standards. They all have enough guts to suppress their fear." Looking at the crowd, he thought, "I must identify the gems from the pile of gravel. They are here for some reason or another. Or perhaps they have hidden motives. I must distinguish those who will look at me with reverence from those who look at me with fear." He declared loudly, "You have all passed the first round. This selection round proves that you are warriors, but I will only accept 30 people. Therefore, I will test you all once again in the second round." He spoke with their confidence in mind. "If you pass this round and become my subordinates, you will be able to live the lives of those who hunt the prey." Lucas was surprised. The life of a predator. Roman walked slowly down the stairs. "Now let's begin the second round. The rules are very simple." He stood before a series of swords kept in wooden barrels. As you can see, there are many types of wooden swords here. Roman stepped down the stairs. "Now let's begin the second round of selection. The rules are simple." He stood before a pile of swords in a wooden barrel. "As you can see, there are many wooden swords here. The differences in species or quantity don't matter to me. Pick whichever sword you prefer." Roman swung his blade through the air. "Prove your worth by dueling me." Henderson was stunned. "He intends to duel." Lucas smiled, puzzled. "All by himself against 120 of us." Roman's eyes narrowed slightly. "You don't need to win. Anyone who can last a minute against me will pass and receive better terms than what was on the notice." People began to murmur. Vulcan spoke up first. "I'll go first." He said, his face expressionless. The crowd cleared a space for the two of them. Roman asked, "What's your name?" He replied immediately, "I am Vulcan." Looking at the wooden sword in Vulcan's hand, he asked, "Are you sure you're okay with that wooden sword?" He insisted, "It's no problem." Vulcan looked at him and mused. The confidence of Roman Dmitri is blown way out of proportion. Are the rumors that he subdued the Bloodfang actually true? But even so, there's no way he can take me down in under a minute. Creed shouted, "All right, get ready." Vulcan continued to think, "I'll pass if I can just hold out for a minute. But screw it. Even if he is the master, I'll be serving from now on. I'm going to seize this opportunity." Creed flipped the hourglass. "Begin." The thoughts in Vulcan's head were louder than ever, determined to leave a mark on his master's mind. He gripped his sword and lunged. He swung with everything he had. Vulcan's eyes froze. Roman had dodged it. His legs tangled and Vulcan immediately fell to the ground, stunned. At that moment, Roman's sword was pointed right at Vulcan's throat. With an icy gaze, he called out, "Next." Lucas watched and assessed. He's on a completely different level. He dodged so quickly. And his movements were so fluid. I never expected someone to move like that. This selection round would be 100 times harder than the first. A powerful, chilling aura began to erupt around Roman, striking fear into many. Right as Vulcan lost to Roman, the image of Roman standing tall with his blade resting on Vulcan's neck, his gaze as if he were ready to devour them all, made everyone think the same thing. In his contemptuous glare looking down at his defeated opponent, everyone realized that Roman was overwhelmingly strong. But they thought as time passed, as others took turns dueling Roman, even though they struggled mightily against such a powerhouse, they harbored the belief that he would eventually grow tired and run out of stamina. An hour had passed since the second selection round began. After 60 bouts, many candidates had collapsed to the ground, their faces full of pain. 60 men had lost to Roman. With a cold expression, he called for the next person, his sword pointed straight at the man in front of him, or rather at the defeated soul cowering at his feet. Roman didn't look the least bit exhausted after those 60 fights. The spectators around the arena were amazed, remembering what he had said before the selection began. If you pass this trial and become my subordinates, you will be able to live the life of a predator. It seemed they finally understood the meaning of those words. Roman was a predator with an overwhelming presence, like a great beast ready to pounce on any prey it sees, a predator who could live exactly as he pleased in a world where only the strongest survive. The crowd was stunned watching him. It felt as if his words were coming true. They secretly thought, right now Roman is still considered the fool of the Dmitri family. This might be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Astonished and fearful expressions appeared on the faces of those standing around the arena. They were determined to become Roman's subordinates, but a single thought cut through. But how can anyone fight that monster? In their eyes, at that moment, Roman was like a devil risen from hell. A dark, oppressive aura blanketed his entire body, making those below him tremble in fear. Roman said slowly, "If a candidate doesn't step forward, everyone here fails." Hearing this, they began to nudge each other forward. Almost no one dared to step up and fight. That man standing there. Just then, a voice rang out. "Fine, I'll go." A face appeared, a small pouch hanging from his belt. A man with blue hair stood tall like a savior in a time of crisis. He introduced himself. "I am the 61st candidate, Lucas." The sky was clear and a breeze swept across the castle. In the back of Lucas's mind, he thought, a monster. Roman Dmitri is a monster. Roman stood before Lucas. That murderous aura remained. The two stood opposite each other, waiting for a new battle to erupt. Lucas's train of thought didn't stop. Beyond his superior martial arts, he thought about the pressure Roman could project. Even Roman's gaze at this moment was just as cold as the aura surrounding him. Roman was completely different from before. Just as he said he wouldn't stay in this remote place forever. Roman's figure stood as still as a giant monument. In his heart, Lucas was certain of one thing: the person standing before him. He would conquer this entire continent. Lucas raised his hand and sword, readying his fighting stance. "I don't care about the 8 silver coins. I will find out if what Roman says is true or not, and I'll do it within a year." The hand holding the hourglass flipped over to start the clock. The command to begin rang out. The falling grains of sand signaled that the time for battle had arrived. From this moment on, along with the flowing sand, Lucas's resolve became even clearer. He was determined to pass this selection round. He gripped his sword and lunged forward like a gale of wind. Roman thought to himself, he didn't hesitate to charge. Other than the first guy, no one else attacked first. Not only that, his tactics. Thinking this, Roman unconsciously broke into a sweat, surprised by Lucas, who, while swinging his sword at his head, was simultaneously aiming a dagger at his heart. A chaotic scene unfolded. Roman stepped back, parrying Lucas's incoming sword. Lucas thought, he dodged the dagger and blocked my sword. Then he shifted his tactics. What about this? He continued to swing his sword toward his legs, also stepping forward to close the distance. The tip of the blade lunged in. Roman was still holding his sword up. A powerful impact made Roman's eyes widen, but he still managed to block the blow. With a swift swing of his blade, he sent his opponent flying. Lucas was knocked back, forced to retreat a few steps. Lucas thought to himself, this still isn't enough, as he began to weigh his options. Usually there's an opening when someone moves that fast, but Roman is like an impenetrable fortress. Lucas gripped his short sword tightly, telling himself he couldn't give up. If he hesitated for even a Second, he'd lose. To hold out for a full minute, he had to take the initiative. Lucas tightened his grip on his sword and lunged forward, trying to gain the upper hand. When Roman saw this, he let out a cold smile, seemingly applauding Lucas's courage. Roman analyzed that the way Lucas charged in wasn't suited for a battlefield, but it was perfect for a duel. A glint of light flashed in Roman's eyes, as if he'd found something truly interesting. He knew exactly why Lucas was forcing the initiative, but along with that newfound amusement, Roman began his counterattack. He stepped forward, reflecting on his true intentions, which weren't simply to see if Lucas could hold out for a minute. Roman lunged, clashing with Lucas's blade. Only now did they truly look like they were in a real duel. That 1 minute mark was a wall intended to show them just how powerful the Lord they serve truly is. The two continued to clash. Lucas swung his sword and Roman dodged. Then Roman struck and Lucas blocked. So this was Roman's true purpose in holding this selection trial, to sear it into their minds. At this point, Roman decided it was time to end the match. An unexpected move caught Lucas off guard, and a lethal blow rained down. Lucas fell backward. It seemed the match had reached its conclusion. A B-rank mercenary could only go so far after all. An average person can reach B rank if they work hard and risk their life, but without the ability to use mana, they can never reach A rank. A rank possesses power that can subdue anyone. At this moment, a bewildered Lucas sat on the ground. The first thing that determines one's mana awakening appeared. A lonely image surfaced, a figure emerging, standing solitary amidst a mountain of corpses. So Lucas had reached his limit. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't surpass B rank. Even so, Lucas gritted his teeth. Even so, I have survived on battlefields where countless others have perished. A massive fire seemed to swallow everything, time and time again, and from that he realized one thing. His hand gripped the small pouch hanging at his waist. To survive, to win, one must use everything at their disposal. Lucas grabbed the pouch and threw it straight into Roman's face as he approached. A cloud of dust flew right into Roman's eyes. He pursed his lips. He threw sand. Onlookers whispered in confusion. He only said to hold out for 1 minute. There were no other rules. But before their eyes, Lucas had already fallen. Roman stood perfectly still, not moving an inch. But then Lucas grabbed his short dagger, let out a loud roar to build momentum, and charged forward like a gust of wind. But then, his eyes widened as if he'd seen something terrifying. Roman was still standing there, gripping his sword, raising it. His eyes flashed with a cold, emotionless light. His eyes! They're bloodshot from the sand, and he's staring right at me. At that moment, Lucas felt like everything was collapsing. His own reflection was clear in Roman's eyes. That gaze was so chilling that Lucas couldn't help but tremble. A short laugh escaped. The dagger dropped from Lucas's hand to the ground. He sighed and said, I surrender.